Americans for the Arts.
He is Jim Browdy. I am Margery Egan. You are listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. Good morning, Jim.
And hi, Margery. We're live from the Boston Public Library and streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. And the reason I mentioned the streaming, particularly on YouTube today, people, I would really urge you to watch. I'd urge you to watch every day. We're at the library, but particularly today because you may get to see me, based on the morning, have a stroke on live radio and TV right here on the show. So frankly, I wouldn't miss it if I were you. So masks are no longer required, as you just heard Henry Santoro say, on planes and trains, thanks to this ruling from a federal judge in Florida yesterday. Within hours, the nation's largest airlines dropped their mandates and let passengers fly with their faces sort of just out there. The move comes even as the CDC had attempted to extend the mask mandate for travel until May. Actually, they had extended it. And while many are traveling for school vacation week. So we're opening the lines to hear from you. If you booked a ticket expecting everyone on your flight would be masked this week, how are you coping? Will the new ruling keep you off public transit and out of the skies? You just heard what the status of the T is. Or does this change mean you're more likely to get on a plane not having to worry about packing a mask? And let me add one more thing to that. What if you've already flown to, let's say, Florida with your kids, and you flew under one set of rules, and you have to fly back under another, and it makes you uncomfortable? What are you to do? I guess the advice is wear a mask, and the other 300 people on the plane won't. 877-301-8970 is our number. You can email us at bpr@wgbh.org or tweet us at BOS Public Radio. So what do you think?
Well, I mean, I won't be flying, I guess. I do like to take the train to New York City, but it's nerve-wracking. I mean,
you can ride on top of the train.
I guess, yeah.
Like Seamus, Mitt Romney's dog on the station wagon.
You know
Same
what
deal.
I was saying to you before, and you poo-pooed me, of course, immediately.
What was it?
That I thought, well, we could have a mask section and a non-mask section, like we used to have smoking sections and non-smoking sections, because, you know, there are a lot of people that are immunocompromised, and there are a lot of people that live with people that are immunocompromised, and so it's very nerve-wracking for those people. I get it. A lot of people.
You want to know why I ridiculed you?
Yeah.
So you're in the front row of the masking section, right behind the 47 rows of the non-masking section. How well protected are you?
I guess it's better to me than sitting 6 inches away from somebody with no mask on, and to have to worry about, you know, getting on the train with someone, getting on the plane with someone, saying, "Gee, do you mind? I'm you know, a cancer survivor, or I have asthma or something. Would you mind wearing a mask?" And then having to confront a passenger. It's very uncomfortable for people. I get why there are a lot of people who never wanted to wear masks, but lots of people are scared and they've got health issues, and I get it. Or they've got little kids that can't get vaccinated yet, and they're scared about that too. I mean, they talk about one of these people in this flight. She was on an airplane. She got a 4-year-old and an 8-month-old. She's got asthma herself. She works with someone who's got an autoimmune disease.
Yeah.
I mean, those people, what are they supposed to do?
Yeah, fly with your head out the window. 877-301-8970. Can you explain something to me in all seriousness? I don't know. I mean, everybody. I mean, we got to do the mandatory. It's a judge nominated by Donald Trump. That's how we describe judges these days. Trump judges, Obama judges, Biden judges, etc. But can you explain something to me, since you're a legal scholar? If the judge is going to rule that the CDC, as Henry Santoro said, exceeded its statutory authority, why did he, I think it's a man, why did he not...
I think it's a woman.
A woman, I'm sorry. Why did she not do a stay for a week through spring vacation, so that at least people already on their trips had an opportunity to return home under the same rules?
You know that the American Bar Association said that this judge was unqualified.
Oh, no, I did not know that.
Yes, that she was one of the people, one of the Trump judges that was deemed to be unqualified. She was 33, I think, at the time. So maybe that's it. Maybe it's purely about politics. But listen to Ralph. Ralph is thrilled.
What did he say?
He says, "Take this mask and shove it."
Beautiful.
Na, 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 na.
Thank you. It's very good.
No, I think, Ralph, you know, I mean, I think I'd love to be sitting next to you on an airplane.
No, it's great. It's really great. And make sure, and by the way, you know what they have? They have seats. Just like you have aisle and window, they now have vaccinated, unvaccinated seats. I mean, I'm serious. This is, you know the great Groucho Marx line? I'll paraphrase it. There's nothing like good planning, and this is nothing like good planning. There should have been, again, a week or a 2-week stay for an opportunity to appeal if that's what the government chose to do, or an opportunity. Let me ask you another question, which we don't know the answer to yet. You planned a flight for New Hampshire. I think school vacation week's not until next week.
Correct.
So you planned your flight to Florida. Again, I keep picking Florida for next week. Because you're concerned about the safety of you or your family, can you cancel based upon the fact that the rules were changed since you booked your ticket and get a full refund?
I don't know. That's a great question.
Thank you.
I don't have the answer.
Well, who does, Margery?
But anyway, I guess it's going to be sort of it's been a Wild West on the airplanes anyway, with people complaining about having to wear a mask. And I think that now there's going to be confrontations between people who are scared to sit next to someone who's not wearing a mask.
You know what they can do, by the way? I just came up with a great idea. It's a preventive kind of thing, assuming this is what stands. Remember when John Kerry was running for president, he went to Cape Kennedy, and he put on that suit that made him look like a sperm? He looked like a human sperm.
That's an idea.
That's what they could give you. If you're a little concerned about the fact that there's no mask, they can slip one of those sperm suits over you and sit in the back of the plane or sit in the restroom or whatever.
That's right. Maybe a hazmat suit or maybe a gas mask or something like that.
Do you get the sense that things a little out of control in this front?
Well, I mean, I think this is where we're headed. We have a woman that was deemed unqualified making this kind of ruling, and then we're about to have the Supreme Court say that the Environmental Protection Agency has no business making environmental rules. So things are changing. We have to get with the program, Jim, I guess, or move to Canada.
Or walk to Florida. 877-301-8970. And by the way, we're not going to attack you, at least Margery's not. If you call and you're thrilled about this no mask situation, what is this long line across the street? Do you have for the Saucony store or something? Where they're giving away free shoes?
It might be something to do with the marathon.
Well, I assume it does have something to do with it. The marathon was yesterday. I assume you know that, right?
I do know that.
Yeah.
I do know that. But the traffic was still bad today getting here. But I don't know what they're doing.
Okay, let's take some calls.
Maybe they're going to Tom Brady's store. Tom Brady's store is right across the street from us.
TV
and it's
12.
really disappointing because for a long time, for about a year, they had this massive 12 by 12 foot picture of Tom Brady looking very handsome. And he was looking right at me, Jim.
I know.
It was a wonderful incentive to come to work at the library.
No
but
more.
Now he's gone.
Well, you know why? Because they wanted to put a mask on his picture, and he said, "No way." Let's start.
I would wave to him.
I know.
He wouldn't wave
back.
back.
A lot of people do that. Let's start in Waltham. Dan, you'd be first on Boston Public Radio on the No Mask Tuesday. Hey there, Dan.
And Jim, how are you today?
Excellent. Thank you for asking.
I'm a short-time listener. I discovered you both about 8 months ago. I'd listened to another public radio station for 20 years, and I didn't know you guys existed, and now I'm falling in love with you.
Oh, that's so kind.
We love that. We're falling in love with you right away.
So, Dan, don't say anything that's going to make me really angry, okay, Dan?
No, I will not.
Okay,
I
go
will
ahead.
not. But let me just tell you, I am on day 5 of COVID.
Oh,
and I'm vaccinated. I'm boosted. All of that. I work at a hospital, and I'm supposed to go see family in Colorado on Thursday.
Oh, brother! And what are you doing?
Of course, I'll make. What's that?
What are you going to do?
Well, first of all, I'm going to make sure I'm negative.
Yeah.
And assuming that I am negative, I'm still going to wear a mask, and that's for other people's benefit, not just for mine.
Well, but Dan, if you're on that plane, and let's assume, I don't know, 300 people on the plane, and 11 of you have masks on, 10 plus you, and 289 don't, or how are you going to feel?
Yeah, it'll be a little weird, but again, you know what? I'm doing it for them.
Good for
you. You know what I mean? So of course I'm going to wear a mask, and again, making sure that I'm negative. But still, I think it's my responsibility.
Hey Dan, how you feeling? How you feeling, by the way?
I think 75% over it. First couple of days were rough, headache, temperature, but then it disappeared pretty quickly, and just a little cough. But that's it.
Well, we're glad you've been with us for 8 months. We hope you stick around, and good luck in Colorado. We hope you're healthy and well. Thanks, Dan.
Attorney Browdy,
Browdy is
Maria has a sorry
Brownie?
about that. Browdy.
Who's Brownie?
He used to run the Homeland Security, didn't he? Wasn't he?
You're doing a heck of a job, Brownie.
FEMA. He was the FEMA guy,
that's
right?
That's what George W.
During
said
Katrina.
about him, right?
During Katrina.
Doing a heck of a
job.
job.
So Maria has a legal question. I don't have the answer.
Oh,
but
I have an
maybe
answer.
You do.
What is it? Yes.
How can a federal judge in Florida rule on public health policy for the rest of the country?
Well, federal because they're federal judges. So
Thank
that's
you, Jim.
the whole deal. I mean, and by the way, it's generally conservatives who were critical of individual federal judges, district court judges, not appellate court judges, but individual district court judges issuing opinions that have an effect on the whole country, but they are federal court judges.
Now, Susan points out, and I think maybe a lot of people are going to feel this way too. She said she just flew across the country. The truth is nobody's wearing a mask consistently because they take it off to eat and drink. She says she's fully vaccinated, has been a compliant mask wearer, but given the recent data lower hospitalizations, it should be up to individuals now. So Susan in Amesbury kind of thinks this is endemic and this is going to be like getting the flu. Have you noticed since we've been going around without masks, I got my first cold in 2 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, by the way, did you know that, for whatever it's worth, the good news is that emailer, what's her name again? Suggesting that Marjorie's not listening to me, so
I am
I'll find
listening
out.
to you.
What's her name?
The federal judge?
No, the emailer.
Oh, Susan from Amesbury.
Susan from Amesbury. While you are right that hospitalizations and deaths in particular, most importantly, are way down, case numbers are way up, close to 40% higher than the 14-day average than it was prior to this. So, in any case, I think that's probably the major attitude and the major response, that they're relieved. I'm not. Sheila in North Attleboro, you're next on Boston Public Radio. We're talking about the non-masking decision made by that federal judge in Florida. Welcome.
Hi, Jim and Margery, daily listener.
Thank you.
Retired with you guys. So I have my bucket list trip scheduled. I'm flying to Rome on Saturday out of Boston.
Great.
2 weeks. And, there are a lot of rules that we need to follow with testing for the trip and for the flight, and then being there and wearing masks is included. So I don't want to be out of my mind because I need to get on the plane and get there. But it's just absurd. It's totally absurd. And I think people that they instantly on one day, we turn it around.
So Sheila, you nervous?
Yes. I mean, I'm nervous, just going on the trip. I mean, looking forward to it.
Yeah.
But the idea that a federal judge, somewhere can make that ruling. And for the people who are tired of this, I think, I'm tired of people dying. I'm tired of people being sick. And I think it's a minimal concession.
I agree.
To cover your
agree.
face.
Sheila, before you go away, this may be a hopeful sign. You're flying to Rome, correct?
Yes.
How long do you think you can hold your breath? I don't know.
Well, I'm going to be wearing my mask.
Good for you. Sheila, I hope you have fun. I hope the anxiety dissipates, and I'm sorry you have to deal with this. Sheila, thank you much for the call.
Lisa says she was at the Raleigh-Durham airport yesterday waiting for a flight when the news broke about mask lifting, and she said it was an interesting scene at the gate. She didn't elaborate, but she did say she kept her N95 mask on. And she also points out that the judge that made this decision was deemed unqualified by the ABA because she never tried a case, criminal or civil, and was a relatively junior lawyer. So
it's really unbelievable.
Yeah,
whether you're a Trump supporter or not, is that unbelievable?
Well, it's important to remember that one of the things that Trump did, and if you like Trump, this makes you very happy, but he had a huge impact on appointments to the judiciary.
Federal courts.
Huge,
you are so right.
Huge. And many of the judges that he appointed were deemed unqualified by the American Bar Association, which is really, really unusual. But it says something about the quality of the judges that he appointed, but they're going to have a huge impact on laws. I mean,
well, the good news, she's only going to be on the court for like 40 years. So that when the 40 years is over, we'll be safe in Florida, I guess that's
okay. We're talking about how you feel about mask mandates. Some of our listeners are thrilled. Some of them are worried about, as one of them put it, being gaslit by the government about this. We're going to keep talking about this for a while longer. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, where, by the way, you don't have to pay or make a reservation.
No.
You can just drop in and drop out and stop by and stop out. Well, people are asking, do you have to be here for the whole 3 hours? No.
Yes, you do.
You do not.
You have to be here for the whole
that's
3
right.
hours.
Or Jim tackles you
really?
at the door when you try to leave.
I have other issues I'm dealing with, but that's one of them. That's correct.
Okay, you're listening to 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio.
Whatever the story,
climate change-induced anxiety is affecting young people as they look ahead to their future.
We're going to talk to you about it.
It's honestly changed the way that we have to live.
Feeling like there's nothing you can do leads to inaction. What do you think creates that hope, or is it just we got to do this?
It's
What's
survival.
The difference?
Survival, yeah, you're so right.
GBH's Morning Edition with Paris Alston and Jeremy Siegel. only on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and New England Dental Group, committed to helping you stop hiding your smile by offering a variety of dental implant solutions to replace missing teeth in one of their 7 locations. Learn more at newenglanddentalgroup.com. And the Bach Center, presenting Celtic Illusion, the modern Irish dance and stage show. You can experience choreography mixed with magical illusion, May 7th at the Bach Center Schubert Theater. Tickets at bachcenter.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Margery, live at the Boston Public Library, streaming, or in my case, thank you, steaming on youtube.com/GBH News. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about a federal judge in Florida who Margery's been disparaging, voiding the mask mandate from the CDC
disparaged her
for travel, planes, and we should make clear, mass transit. Even the T in Boston is studying, reviewing the decision to see what they'll do. If you're already traveling for school vacation week, how's this affecting you? And if you plan to take a trip as the weather gets nicer and you can be outdoors, is the thought of being on a 6-hour plane ride, like that woman going to Rome with unobstructed mouth breathers and unvaccinated kids giving you hives. 877-301-8970.
Listen to this email from Peter. I never understood how a person thinks who says they won't wear a mask. If you catch COVID and are without symptoms and you pass it on to a weak person, a child, or immunocompromised person, etc., then you bring harm and suffering to another person. If you know you may harm or cause another person suffering and possibly death, and you don't care, what kind of person are you?
What's that person's name? That's my kind of person.
Peter.
Peter, good for you. By the way, we have sound of a couple of passengers on a Delta flight cheering the news. This is from a tweet from this guy, William Legate.
The Biden administration announced that the Transportation Security Administration will no longer enforce the federal mandate requiring masks in all U.S. airports and on-board aircraft.
By the way, all of the people who cheered the flight attendant's announcement have prior records. I don't know if you're aware. 877, I don't think they do. 877-301-8970. We're getting your reaction to the judge's decision, which is effective, at least on planes and trains, immediately. Again, mass transit systems like ours here are reviewing the decisions, but in lots of other states, how'd you like to ride on a subway without people who are literally in your behind or closer, not wearing a mask?
I think that's one of the reasons the T is not up to previous. I mean, even with the mask mandate, they still weren't up to previous.
Well, they may have some state law or regulation that supports them too.
Here's Jack. He's one of our frequent emailers.
What's
he says
he say?
It seems most of the country is pleased that the mask mandate has ended. Of course, there's still a mask obsession in pockets of the country. That includes higher education and BPR listeners.
877-301-89. You know what's rather incredible? I don't know what the connection to this judge is that caused Donald Trump to pick her, but there are zillions of really smart conservative lawyers in this country who would love to be a judge. Why would you pick somebody who is unqualified by the American Bar Association when the Federalist Society, I'm assuming, could give you the names of hundreds, if not thousands, of young conservative lawyers who have practiced in a courtroom, who'd be more appropriate.
But don't you remember? Judge after judge after judge was deemed unqualified.
Well, I'm asking, but why? What's the point?
I don't know. Maybe, I mean, look at some of the candidates that the former president has supported in these primaries, the Republican primaries. I mean, many other Republicans think that they're not going to be able to win, and he supports them anyway. So, including
some of his own former staff, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the president's right and they're wrong, and they will win, but I don't know.
You don't think somebody like Dr. Oz is well qualified to be in the Senate? Seriously, don't you think we need a snake oil salesman or two in the United States? I'd say we do. Let's go to Saranya. Did I get it right in Wellesley? I hope I did.
It's hi Jim, hi Margery.
Hi.
Did I pronounce your name close to correctly or no?
Close to correct. It's Saranya from Walpole, actually.
Saranya from Walpole. So I got your name wrong and your city. Other than that, we're off to a great start. How are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm good, thank you. Long time listener, first time caller.
Oh, we're very glad. Thank you very much. What's up?
This news makes me really mad. I I lost my grandmother to the first wave of COVID.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
2 young children that cannot be vaccinated yet. And I was really counting on the masks being in place to take them on flights. We have an international trip coming up in the summer that we've planned for a long time. And it blows my mind that Delta decided to announce this mid-flight without even having a conversation with their corporate team or their legal team. Like the pilot just decided that they could announce it and have everyone take their mask off. It just goes to show how thoughtless the whole policy is. And I hope they get their pants sued off because this is a class action lawsuit waiting to happen.
You know, by the way, that is a wonderful point about the mid-flight announcement, why it had to be made then. Yeah. So what are you going to do about your international trips planned for this summer? What are you going to do?
We'll still go. I'm hoping my older child will be vaccinated by then. My baby will not. But we'll mask up. I mean, we haven't seen our family in 2 years.
Oh, boy.
So I don't know that I'm willing to cancel it. We'll still go, but we'll do everything we can to stay safe. It makes me angry, but I don't see a way around it.
We're really glad you made your first call, and we hope you make your second soon. Thank you so much. Good luck on the trip. Thanks.
This is from Peggy. Get this. A friend dealing with cancer hasn't left the house in 2 years, except for walks outside on a doctor visit. She wears an N95 and rubber gloves. Her spouse, who works from home, observes similar quarantine practices. She got COVID anyway, went to Brigham and Women's ER at doctor's advice, spent 24 hours in the emergency room because there were no available beds upstairs. People think this thing is over, but it isn't. Maybe many people think it's just tough luck for people like my friend.
877-301-8970 is our number, and if you just tuned in, we're talking about the decision by a federal judge in Florida. Margery will mention now that she was ruled unqualified by the ABA to say that the CDC acted outside its authority with this mask mandate on public transportation. So it is dead.
A couple of our listeners, emailers, have reminded me that she clerked for Clarence Thomas.
She did? Oh, well, that's some relevant experience, and he's doing well. And she clerked for his wife, too. By the way, do you believe that issue? So many issues that in any other time in our history would be front page for weeks. Ginny Thomas is lobbying for the insurrection, for the overturning the election, while her husband is the one dissenting vote on turning over Trump records that include that text. What's going to happen as a result of that? Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Well, that's why people worry about the democracy. They think we're just sliding into kind of a lawlessness. It used to be that we were a government of laws, not of men and women, we should add. But I think that's changed, hasn't it?
Well, for lawless, we might as well be maskless. I mean, why not go the whole 9 yards?
We could be lawless and maskless as well. Okay, let's go to Laura from Woonsocket, Rhode Island. Hi, Laura.
Hey, Laura.
Hi, thank you. I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller.
God, we love that.
I think you got to say that now.
No, whether it's true or not, we're thrilled to have you, Laura. What's up?
Right. Both my kids are immunocompromised. They are vaccinated. My husband and I are vaccinated. I think what people forget is you can still wear a mask if it's not required.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
My kids' school does not require masks, but my kids wear a KN95 every day. And they've been good. They say that everybody wearing crappy cloth masks, half on, doesn't do much. But if people who are sick would wear a KN95, they're going to be more protected. So that's kind of the route we're going.
Hey, Laura, how are your kids treated by their classmates who are not wearing masks? Are they ridiculed in any fashion? Or are they treated respectfully?
No, they're in high school, so I don't know if it would make a difference, but no, not at all.
That's great to hear.
And there are a number of kids. There were way more than my daughter thought, like in her classes, that are wearing them than she really thought would be.
I think the issue, Laura, is if you are on an airplane or a train and you can't move and you're next to someone with no mask, who's coughing or sneezing, and you have to at some point take a mask off to have a drink or have a sip of water or whatever. I mean, I think that's the issue. It's the proximity you could be for many, many hours. And I think it's scary to people.
But having said that, Laura's right. If you choose to wear it, it's not a perfect solution. The perfect solution is, or close to it, is everybody wearing a mask. But if they're not, then at least do it yourself. Laura, thanks for your first call. We really appreciate it, and thanks for listening. 877-301-8970. So would you, I don't know if we've said this, if you had a trip planned next week to go to wherever on a plane, would you do it? You're a big Amtrak person. You go visit your kid in New York City. How do you feel about that?
I haven't been in a plane in ages, but I am worried about Amtrak.
So what are you going to do if you had a plan to see your granddaughter?
I guess I would, if someone sits next to me, I nicely ask them, would you mind, or I'll move. If you don't feel comfortable, I'll try to move and find another seat. I don't want to sit next to somebody for 5 hours. It's just too nerve-wracking.
And when you ask them if they'd put on a mask and they cough on you in response, what do you do?
Well, then I would want, because the thing is, you don't want, you feel really guilty. I have a newborn grandchild. She can't get vaccinated. I don't want to have to take 9,000 tests, between the time I get, land in New York City and the time I get to the apartment. It's just kind of crazy. You imagine how you'd feel if you infected an infant.
Can you guys check? Is the feds talked to the CDC about appealing this thing, or are they just essentially dropping? Give us a little update if you can. Trenni and our colleagues are saying they are. But for the moment, this judge's ruling is not stayed. It's in effect. And as you just heard, mid-flight, at least on that Delta flight, they dropped it. By the way, we have a GBH poll on our YouTube live stream. Do you think lifting mask requirements on airlines is a good idea? 77% said no. 22% said yes, and I guess 1% are not interested or something.
I think that's a good idea.
What is it?
Can we just saw Florida and Texas off from the southern United States?
Don't you think, in all seriousness, secession is going to be an issue at some point in some of those states?
I don't know.
I don't mean as a serious thing, but I would assume so.
Well, I think that's one of the problems. The red states that are very concerned with who's gay and who's not gay, they need a lot of money from the federal government. It's the blue states that don't need the money from the federal government. We're sending the money to them, so maybe when they get, really down to brass tacks, they wouldn't want to lose that.
Except a lot of those states, as you know, when it comes to nutrition and housing and Medicaid, health, are sending money back rather than using free federal money to protect the lives and health of their citizens.
But where all the most of the federal money goes, it goes to those states.
Like Kentucky, for example, like Mitch McConnell, Mr. Don't Spend Too Much. I believe they have the greatest reimbursement rate, his home state, not surprisingly, of any state in the country. So, state of Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell. Let's take a couple more calls before we're done here, Margery.
Let's go to Sue in Dorchester. Hi, Sue.
Hey, Sue.
Hi, how are you?
Excellent.
I was listening to you talking about the mask mandate and everything, and I think it's just everybody around here at least knows that you need to wear the mask, and if you're vaccinated, you need to be vaccinated, wear the mask, and you're all set. And there's just enough people out there who aren't going to do it regardless. So you just have to kind of let them do what they're going to do and just keep yourself, and if you have small children or something, get them to wear a mask or be more cautious with them. But, we've been told for over 2 years that this is what needs to be done, and people still don't want to do it. So I think, you're just talking yourself to death. They know what needs to be done, and, if they say you don't have to do it, then wear it anyway.
Yeah, but Sue, I agree with almost everything you said, except the comforting thing for me, at least, was up until at least May 3rd, and we don't know if it was going to be extended or not by the CDC, you didn't have to worry about the outliers who didn't give a damn about public health issues. They were required to wear a mask to get on a flight, and that was a comforting, or a train or public transit. That's a comforting thing, and that is gone. But you're right, now that it is gone, the only backup is you protect yourself, and if you care, others as well as you possibly can. So one can't quarrel with that. Sue, thank you very much for your call.
There's been a lot of talk about the air circulation on airplanes, which supposedly is pretty good.
Yeah.
But one of the emails just pointed out, well, what about when you're standing in line all over the airports for a million other things? The air circulation there is not quite the same. Point. Anyway,
we have time for one more, and that's it.
Let's go to, where are we going, you guys?
1 second. We'll be going somewhere.
We're going to Joy in Newton. Hi, Joy.
Hey, Joy.
Hi, how you two? How are you?
We're never better. How are you, Joy? What's up?
Yeah. So Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
So I wanted to point out, I mean, obviously what everyone is saying is, to me, so spot on. I'm really immunocompromised, and I'll be taking a trip to Europe in a month, so I'm nervous, especially now with this. But what I really wanted to say is that so many people, they just think it's over. And I wanted to give you two examples, and it's really disturbing to me. So the other day I called my doctor's office to say that I'd really like to switch to a virtual visit because, you know, I didn't need to be in person. And the scheduler actually said to me, you know, I don't know if we're still doing that because that was during COVID.
That's great. That's a pretty good story.
I mean, if we weren't on the radio, you know what my response in my head was. And I couldn't believe I actually told my doctor so that she could be, you know, updated that COVID is still here. And then I just had an appointment at MGH, like I just got back. And I get on the elevator, and, you know, you do have to wear a mask in the hospital, but people were pouring into the elevator, pouring in that I actually, after 8 people on, I said, I'm sorry, you other people have to take the next elevator. There's still COVID here. We still have to distance. And it's just, you know, it is what it is. But
Joy, if you can travel around with me, I'd love it. So if you're free, give me a buzz. Thank you for the call. Let me be clear about this before we leave this topic. I am totally fine with, for example, in Boston and place where I live, Cambridge, all these restrictions being lifted. They were pursuant to some metric that seemed to be reasonable, even though the positivity rate in Boston is above that metric at the moment. This is a capsule, a closed capsule in which you are sitting in some cases for 6 hours, a plane, a train, or whatever it is. That's a totally different kettle of fish. So this is not like everybody's got to wear a mask everywhere forever. This is in certain settings, at least to me and Margery, it made sense.
Okay, we are moving on. We're going to talk with our NBC sports expert, Trenni Kusnierek, on, of course, the Boston Marathon, and also the Celtics in the playoffs. Trenni Kusnierek is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
The world connects you with the people of Ukraine.
I hope on our army. Our army is very, very good and very strong. And I hope on America, USA.
We bring you the latest from Ukraine and all the news from around the globe. Join us on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Wilbraham and Munson Academy, a coeducational college preparatory experience starting at grade 6, offering in-person campus tours daily in Wilbraham, Massachusetts. Learn more at wma.us. And Weco Hospitality. Weco cooks and delivers chef-prepared dinners every day. No subscription necessary. You can visit wecohospitality.com to see their weekly menus.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Margery live from the Boston Public Library. I'm actually getting my dinner from Weco tonight. That's a hell of a coincidence. We're streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. Here's a little sound from the CBS broadcast of the Boston Marathon finish line just about 24 hours ago.
And when one of the greatest races in Boston Marathon history on the 50th anniversary of the first ever women's elite field, the best marathoner in the world on the women's side is going to come through with a victory, but needed every stride to get to the finish line first. Paris Jepchirchir is the Boston champion.
Pretty good finish. Joining us now to discuss the marathon and more is Sports Authority Trenni Kusnierek. Trenni's a reporter and anchor for NBC Sports Boston who is really upset that we played sound from CBS.
Well,
good to see you, Trenni.
That sounded a lot like our guy, Paul Swangard. So
Wait,
I was wondering,
it?
I don't know if it was the NBC. It sounded a lot like Paul and
We
Paul's
just did
call.
it to aggravate you, I guess, is what the bottom line was. Nice to see you anyway.
So, Trenni Kusnierek, the race was great, the women's race was great, but I think that the heartstrings,
I know where you're going.
Henry Richard, Martin Richard's older brother, and people may remember Martin Richard was killed on the day of the marathon. He was 8 years old, I believe, at the time. His whole family was at the finish line as Henry, the older brother, arrived. Tell us about that.
Well, we have sound first.
Let's play the sound.
Here he is right after, this is Henry, the older brother, right after crossing the finish line yesterday.
This is 9 years in the making, so for me, I couldn't be more happy to finally get here.
What's the message you want to send to everybody?
No matter what happens, just gotta keep fighting. And you'll get to where you want to go. It was incredible.
How proud would your brother be?
He'd be proud. He'd be happy. But he'd also be doing it with me.
It's a pretty good line from Henry Richard right there.
Yeah. So what'd you think?
I mean, it was an emotional, amazing moment. I didn't see it happen live. The broadcast I did ended at 1 p.m., and so I trekked out to the course to mile 23.1-ish to watch the girls I train with and run with and support them. You know what? I mean, not to get off topic, but I've run a lot of races, but man, it's cool to watch. It's just such an incredible day. And to see these people like a Henry Richard, they don't do this every day. You don't train for it. You don't quit your job. You're not like a Paris Jepchirchir, whose entire life revolves around running. You have to fit it in. I mean, as an 18-year-old, he's either a senior in high school or a freshman in college, and you're trying to fit in all of this training. And the emotion, it's emotional just to run. You're just physically drained and emotionally drained. But for Henry to cross that finish line at a place, at almost the exact place where his family lost so much and they experienced such incredible tragedy, because they obviously lost their younger brother Martin. His sister Jane lost her leg. His mother suffered, I believe, hearing.
Was it hearing?
Eyesight. And father
has
hearing
loss.
Yeah.
And you know what? There might not be physical scars on Henry, but think of the emotional scars of what he went through. And to for the last 9 years to sit in those stands and watch the athletes, and then yesterday finally, run that race. To me, that is the greatest message they could ever send, that you tried to break us, you tried to break our city, but you can't do it. To me, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. It was the best moment of the marathon.
You said maybe no physical injuries in the whole case. Adrienne Haslett had serious physical injuries.
So I did see her.
She runs with Shalane Flanagan. How great was that?
Oh, it was cool. When they went by to our section, we're a bunch of girls who run together, and we love running, so we know all the pro runners. We went nuts, and they turned to us and they gave us fist pumps. It was so cool. And again, when you watch the marathon at that level, again, it's one thing. It's incredible to see a Des Linden, a Nell Rojas, who was the top female yesterday. I mean, her story is really incredible. I was just telling Margery about Elkanah Kabet was the second fastest American male, born in Kenya, but became a U.S. citizen in 2013. He joined the U.S. Army. He now works and trains. He doesn't train with an elite group. He trains with a U.S. Army training group. Him to see what his dedication and what it means for him to run. Those stories are all amazing. But when you're standing on the sidelines and you're by those barriers and you see someone who is being pushed in a push cart by their family members, or a blind runner or a deaf runner who's running with Achilles Track Club, you might just even see someone who's perfectly able-bodied, but they are struggling and they are not giving up. That to me is what makes Marathon Monday. And you guys asked what that line is. People are getting their. You can get your medals engraved. At Marathon
neat.
Sports, the day after you can wait in that long line, and it wraps. When I parked here, it's all the way around.
What do they engrave
Exeter.
on there?
They engrave. I think they usually engrave
your name and time.
your name and your time.
Yeah.
Your finishing.
You get
time.
a little mask engraved on it too, Margery, if you choose. One last thing about the marathon.
I have one last thing.
We had Bill Evans on yesterday, who obviously has run zillions of marathons, a couple of dozen in Boston. He hurt his back, so he couldn't run this year. He was a former police commissioner. I'm sure everybody knows. Before he ran,
he's a good runner.
Very good runner. Before he was with us yesterday afternoon, he mentioned that not only was he down at the finish line embracing the whole Richard family, but Lingji Lu's parents were here too. I mean, it is really the strength. The whole thing is just unbelievable to me.
It's one thing to lose a child, but it's another to lose someone you love, a child, in such a public manner and in a place that you can't escape. Right? If you ever want to come into the city and enjoy just go for dinner you're walking past a memorial that's memorializing a person that you loved and lost. Most of us are allowed to grieve in private. They were not able to grieve in private. And to have the support of so many important figures in this city of that time, I think just speaks volumes about what that day meant to the city and how it didn't break us in any way, shape, or form. If anything, it, not to sound like cliche, but it made us stronger, right?
Oh, that's right. They opened up Beacon Street at 5:45 yesterday afternoon. I want to report on that.
She's aggravated already. I can tell.
So you could cross the street and get to the Star Market.
It is difficult. Like yesterday we went to Washington Square. That's where this group I run with watches from. And you can't get off at Washington Square because you can't cross the street.
Exactly.
So you have to go to Tappan Street.
So
but
selfish.
let me just tell you this though. It is quite the operation. So they have it like split. So the road is split, and they have these markers, and you all stand on this little box, this white box, and you wait. And then they close off one part, and then they move the runners to the other, and they're like, go, 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 and you like run across the street, and then they close that side. It's you know what?
Yeah.
Those volunteers, they were out there. I had to be at the Fairmont Copley yesterday at like 4:45 in the morning to interview athletes. All those volunteers were there already. They were going out to everywhere they needed to be. Like, they're the unsung heroes of
We know what
this-
they do
of
at Cleveland
this.
Circle, too. They're coming down Commonwealth Avenue, and then they go down Chestnut Hill Avenue and then take a left onto Beacon Street. They go Beacon Street the rest of the way. Well, almost the rest of the way until they get to Boylston Street here. But anyway, they have this whole operation because I was waiting on Chestnut Hill Avenue because I needed to get somewhere. And they have all these trucks come out and all these clean up the
All the
cups
cups and the
operation. I mean, it is
gels and
amazing.
the
Meanwhile,
puke.
there's 20 cars sitting behind them trying to be patient, and this operation continues. But
Margie, what I would say to you, why did you plan to do something on Marathon Monday?
it was a bad idea. It was a bad idea.
We should
Trenni.
say one more thing about yesterday. We had Bobby Gibb with us, who obviously was
Yeah.
the first person to ever complete the race in '66, won it in pre-sanctioned days in '67 and '68. We had Des Linden, who came in 13th. Yesterday was
had
the
Des Linden on?
Yeah, she was great. We interviewed her on Friday. She was terrific. And also a bourbon expert. Much more
And
important.
coffee.
Coffee. She mentioned the coffee
Yep.
thing.
Her husband
But-
actually makes his own coffee.
Yeah,
I
she
bought a
said
pair of
it.
shoes and I got some beans.
Oh,
so
did
we
you?
haven't tried
That's
it yet
great.
because we're still finishing other beans. But, I'll
But
let
the
you
other
know.
thing we should say, it was also the 50th anniversary of the first sanctioned women
Yep,
participation, the 8
1972.
women, when Nina Cusick, I think, won in '72, and so that was a great moment as well. Trenni, we ordinarily do not talk to you about the regular in-town teams unless it's an incredible minute. I happened to be home over the weekend, and I happened to see the Celtics game.
Gosh, yeah.
One of the
Unbelievable.
greatest games I've ever seen in my whole life, even if you don't care about basketball. Here's a little bit of sound, courtesy of ESPN, of the final couple of seconds of this
guys are
incredible,
really killing my network today.
incredible game. Here it is.
Home of the Celtics.
Here it is.
Celtics have a timeout, decide not to use it here. Brown the drive. Jaylen Brown kicks it out. Smart fakes. Inside. Tatum spins and he puts it in. Celtics go up by one.
Does that give you chills a little bit at the buzzer?
Okay, that sound you had to use because it wasn't on our air. They had a solo national right, so I won't
Thank
get mad
you
at
very
for
much.
using
I
that.
appreciate
It's
your
on
forgiveness.
NBC. It is on
Okay,
NBC
fine.
Sports Boston tomorrow, though.
It is. Wednesday night, yeah, game
7
2.
o'clock game 2.
So how about Kyrie Irving?
Oh, what a jerk, right?
Update us.
Okay, so I wasn't at the office yesterday, but I'm looking through our morning show note today, and Cedric Maxwell, who of course played for the Celtics in the '80s,
MVP in the finals, right?
MVP in a finals, great guys. Now the radio voice analyst for the Celtics. He said, listen, there's no reason that fans need to swear at Kyrie, and I guess he says, I kind of don't blame him for losing his mind. Here's my thing. I don't blame you for getting upset. I do blame you for the childish antics of flipping off the crowd. Not once, but at least twice that we caught him. So once it was he hit, I think, a three-pointer in the corner, right in front of his bench, and he just kind of quick flipped it. Like a real quick flip. And then he was standing in the corner, and someone must have yelled something to him, and he stood with his hands behind his head and double bird. That was a double bird.
Double bird.
If you're going to do it and if you're going to be a jerk, just be a jerk. Full on double bird. Let
Beautiful.
everybody see it.
Beautiful.
Don't try to sneak around and sucker punch somebody and then blame it on the fans. And also, you kind of brought it on yourself. You stood in front of an arena full of people and said, I'll be back next year if you'll have me.
When he was a Celtic,
When he
for
was
those
a
who don't
Celtic.
recall.
And then he's just a bad influence, and he kind of quits on the team, and he doesn't try hard, and they lose in the first round of the Milwaukee Bucks of that year in the postseason. And then he leaves, and he's angry, and it's well, what do you expect to happen? This is
what
sports.
What
It's
about
a
his
rivalry.
he in status
he
in
is
New York City?
not. It doesn't matter. They like most places now. The private. It's there. There are places where private enterprises, private businesses still have vaccine mandates, but New York, much like Boston, doesn't require anyone.
Toronto, you got to be
Toronto
vaccinated.
is the one where if they advance and they have to play, if the Nets would advance and the Raptors would advance, and at some point they have to play the Raptors, he would not be able to enter Toronto. This is also going to be the Red Sox host the Blue Jays tonight, but I think they go to Toronto.
They do.
Either right after or next week.
Do.
And there are a couple of high-profile Sox players.
Only for 30 seconds, because I want to get to this next story. This dope who pitches for the Red Sox. How do you pronounce H-O-U-K? Hawk. Dumb as
Tanner Hope.
Dumb as a post. His position when he said he was unvaccinated, which is fine in terms of being honest about it, was it's a personal decision, doesn't affect anybody, except for the fact that you're making a couple of $1 million to pitch next week, and you can't pitch and support your teammates because you would be violative of Canadian law. I mean, these people
and they know.
Can't be this stupid.
But they are, Jim.
Okay,
they
fine.
And they also think
okay,
that they can say this and they're not going to be questioned and say, oh, it doesn't affect anyone else. But it does. It affects everyone in your locker room. And let's be honest, right now for a series in April, the teammates probably are just going to, they understand, they know, right? They probably accept it, or maybe they don't. I would imagine, though, that it wouldn't cause too much strife in the clubhouse right now. But they have to play, if my memory serves, the last series of this season for the Red Sox is a 3-game series in Toronto. Wow. And let's just say, for argument's sake, that the Red Sox and the Blue Jays are neck and neck for the AL East. Or even like the Red Sox are fighting for a wild card spot. Like they're just trying to get into the postseason and they're teetering on the edge. And you don't have Chris Sale and Tanner Hoke and who knows, and we'll know who else by the time we get to the series in Toronto, who else isn't vaccinated because they won't be able to go. And if they're not available, to me, then whatever criticism you get, you deserve because you've brought it on. Your selfishness has brought it on yourself. If you do everything for the team and the team is the most important,
I'm with you.
Then you should do what the team requires.
I don't know if I said it. Dumb as a post. Now, can we get to another issue? There's almost not a week.
Jim's words, not mine. Jim's words.
Almost not a week that you come here that there's another story of Olympic-level athletes being
this one's terrible.
Survivors of sexual abuse. We all know we talk about the Larry Nassar case ad nauseum. It is gross. This story of these snowboarders, these women who were allegedly assaulted by this Foley guy. Here's what my position is. You know that in the abstract, in general, I'm not crazy about men coaching women's team. Like Gino Auriemma at Connecticut, great coach, never done anything wrong as far as I know. I don't like it anyway. A woman should be coaching them. The solution to this problem, beyond jailing these criminals like Foley, solution is there shouldn't be men coaching women's teams. There are tons of qualified women in 2022 to be doing these jobs.
Unfortunately, what that could possibly lead to is then women can't coach men's teams, and then you're taking opportunities away. So I wouldn't go that far.
How many women have been sexually assaulting and abusing men last time you looked?
Not
exactly.
Certainly not as common and not what we hear about. But if we're going to, I don't want to punish the whole because of the acts of the few. That I would prefer to not do that. So I wouldn't say. And plus, like, if the best person for the job is a male, like maybe it's just a sport that there weren't a lot of females who excelled at it or who want to coach in it. I'm fine with a male coaching female athletes, as I'm more than fine with a female coaching male athletes. What I don't like is they put in this safe sport. Like, this is what irritates me about this story. So. After everything happened with Larry Nassar and with USA Gymnastics, the U.S. Olympic Committee, the U.S. Olympic team, put in place something called Safe Sport. It was supposed to be this third-party group of people who are objective and don't have personal ties to the coaches and the doctors and the administrators. So when you go to them and say that this guy Foley, is it
Foley? I don't know what his first name is.
I forget what his first name is.
Daniel, I think.
This guy Foley,
Peter
Foley is intimidating women, forcing them to take their clothes off or suggesting they take their clothes off to take pictures, punishing them and not putting them on teams when they don't, sexually assaulting them. You should be able to go to Safe Sport, to an independent third party, and say, this is my complaint, this is what's happening, and Safe Sport should immediately investigate it, immediately flag this person, immediately take them away from these women. Instead, what Safe Sport did what they said was, well, we've gotten complaints, we haven't gotten them directly from the accusers, so we can't really do anything. And then when an accuser came forward and told them about everything this man had done, they told them about how long and drawn out the process was going to be and how difficult, and basically questioned whether or not this woman wanted to continue on, almost dissuading them from doing it, thus protecting once again the assailant in these instances.
You know what I was going to say stupidly after my first comment, which you didn't agree with? I was going to say, forget safe sport. These women should go right to the cops. And as soon as I thought it, I said, well, the women in Michigan State went to the FBI, and the FBI ignored their complaints.
There is a bigger question here, and I guess the question is, what is it with the sexual abuse of teenage women, young women, and children? Because the schools don't report it, sports don't report it,
you're
the
absolutely
FBI doesn't go after it, the cops don't go after it. There is we just don't want to go after this crime. It is really weird.
Margery, I can't wrap my brain around it. Like, I don't understand how, if a child or a teenager or even a young woman, you don't need to be a child. I mean, some of these women were young women. They were college-aged and in their 20s.
It's a crime.
It's a crime. And if you come to someone and
we are in total denial
and
in so many areas.
You have the strength. Like, the reason so many people don't come forward when they're sexually assaulted is because they're because of this. They're never believed. It's like, oh, well, are you sure? What were you wearing? Were you drinking? Did you do something?
You're totally right.
Yeah.
You're totally
and so we don't make it, like, safe sport should make it a safe place for athletes to come forward and talk about this
Well,
stuff.
the cops should also do their jobs. When the cops are approached, you shouldn't have to go through an intermediate agency. If you're sexually assaulted, you should be able to go to a cop, and a cop should treat you respectfully and go after whoever the abuser is.
I agree 100%, but I learned when I was in Iceland a few years ago, we were talking about why their domestic violence rate is high, but it's high because it's reported. It's not high per capita per se, but it's because when a woman calls the police department, it's not just a police officer who goes to their house. A trained social worker goes with them and gives them, they know how, like, to me, it is asking a police officer a lot. Like, how do you deal with someone who's in that kind of distress if you don't have the training in it? But why are we not, instead of, like,
You're right.
why, if we're going to take these funds and we're going to move them around when it comes to law enforcement, why aren't we moving them into areas where we're employing experts who can help assist those police officers, and that way these things don't happen?
Well, the two things we do is we do that training, bring the social workers, and as a preventive mechanism,
we just don't let men.
Don't let them arrest all the male coaches and see what happens. Trenni, it's great to see you.
Thank you very much, Trenni Kusnierek. We'll be speaking Trenni Kusnierek, a reporter and anchor for NBC Sports Boston. Thank you so much, Trenni. Coming up, we are so excited. You may know her from RuPaul's Drag Race. She's got a show tonight in Boston. Drag queen BenDeLaCreme is here, and she's ready, like all the rest of us, to be committed. Stay tuned. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and Friday from the Boston Public Library.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Margery Regan. Just ahead, more smart
conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Celebrity Series, presenting Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, April 28th through May 1st at the Box Under Wang Theater. New works, Ailey classics, and revelations at every performance. CelebritySeries.org. Discover the ways the fossil fuel industry has continued to cast doubts on science while avoiding accountability. On Frontline, the power of big oil. Tonight at 10 on GBH2.
I'm investigative reporter Chris Burrell, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Ahead on Boston Public Radio, we're live at the Boston Public Library, beginning hour 2 of our show with BenDeLaCreme of RuPaul's Drag Race fame. She's stopping
FTs to us and their influence on the art world 2022. John King on the latest out of D.C., including Joe Biden's continuing plunge in nationwide opinion polls. All that and more ahead. Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The Ukrainian government says Russia's full military offensive in the eastern part of Ukraine is underway. NPR's Ada Peralta reports this follows days of more intensive fighting.
According to the Ukrainian government, Russia is trying to solidify its control of the Donbas region in the east of the country. The military says it is setting up anti-aircraft battalions in the northeast, and it continues to move troops and equipment into Ukraine. And while the heaviest fighting is happening in the east of the country, Russia has launched airstrikes across Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia has amassed most of its forces in the east, and they now seem more organized. However, he says Ukraine will fight. Quote, "We will not give up anything Ukrainian." Ada Peralta, NPR News, on the road in eastern Ukraine.
Russia's war against Ukraine is the main reason why forecasters at the International Monetary Fund are now downgrading their outlook for global economic growth this year and next to 3.6%. The IMF's chief economist, Pierre-Olivier Gourinchas, has more.
Beyond its immediate and tragic humanitarian impact, the war will slow economic growth and increase inflation.
The IMF previously projected global growth would be closer to 4.5% before the direct impact of the war in Ukraine, as well as the West's retaliatory sanctions against Russia, came into greater focus. Gourinchas says the warring neighbors' economies are expected to experience steep contractions. Travelers are showing mixed reactions as major airlines drop mask requirements. Yesterday, a federal judge struck down the federal mask mandate on all public transportation. NPR's David Shaper has a reaction from Chicago.
Videos on social media show some passengers cheering and taking off masks mid-flight when the ruling striking down the mask mandate was announced. But at Chicago's O'Hare Airport, the vast majority of travelers still wore masks while checking in, going through security, or waiting for luggage. One of the few who didn't was 45-year-old Ken Matijo, who was returning home from San Juan.
You know, I think it should be the person, everyone's right, whether they want to do it, they don't want to do it. It should be their choice. Made by the individual, not by a government shouldn't regulate this.
But others say they only felt safe enough to travel through crowded airports and on tightly packed planes because of the mask requirement, which public health experts say was effective in helping prevent the spread of COVID-19. David Shaper, NPR News, Chicago.
The results of an independent autopsy reportedly show that a black man who was killed during an encounter with Michigan police earlier this month was shot in the back of the head. Lawyers for the family of Patrick Lyoya say the 26-year-old was killed while face down on the ground. An official autopsy report has yet to be made public. State police are expected to give the results of their probe to the Kent County prosecutor to consider possible charges. It's NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro in Brookline. A new poll finds more than 75% of Massachusetts residents are concerned about climate change, with nearly 50% saying it'll pose a very serious problem if it is not addressed. GBH Radio's Mary Blake has more on the survey results.
While the poll conducted by Mass Inc. finds a majority of respondents believe climate change is real, Research Director Richard Parr says the level of urgency in addressing climate change has dropped from a similar survey 3 years ago, and he believes there are several reasons why.
So we've had a presidential election, we've had COVID, we've had war now that's causing energy prices to go up, and I think that people are just reacting to a lot of stuff in their own personal lives, and maybe climate change is kind of getting a little bit lost in the shuffle for them.
The issue is losing importance among voters, too. Only 34% say they currently vote based on their climate priorities. Mary Blake, GBH, Boston's local NPR.
President Biden is in New Hampshire today, but in the meantime, he's issuing a disaster declaration related to the major nor'easter that hit Massachusetts back in January. The winter storm dumped more than 2 feet of snow in some parts of the state. The president's declaration means that new federal funds will be made available to the state as well as to local governments and nonprofits that were affected by the storm. In sports, the Red Sox and Blue Jays play at a soggy Fenway tonight. First pitch is at 7:10. The Bruins are in St. Louis tonight. And in the forecast, the clouds are beginning to dissipate. We're looking at some sun out there right now, high mid-50s. It's 55 in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include DuckDuckGo, committed to making privacy online simple. Used by tens of millions, they offer internet privacy with one download. DuckDuckGo, privacy simplified at duckduckgo.com.
GBH's Morning Edition with Paris Alston and Jeremy Siegel.
We have a newsletter called The Wake Up, which is a way for us to not only round up everything that we're talking about and seeing.
The Wake Up is also a place where you can talk to us.
A place for you to tell us about something interesting you've seen around town lately.
We've had a lot of people who want to be part of the conversation, and we want more people to be part of the conversation. You can do that by going to gbhnews.org/The Wake Up.
Here's Jim Browdy. I am Margery Egan. You are listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, hour number 2. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library.
Hello again, Margery. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Believe me, they are not applauding for us. If you were here, you'd know why. We're also streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. I wouldn't miss this segment. Now, even if you've never seen an episode of RuPaul's Drag Race, or RuPaul, as our next guest occasionally refers, there's no question the show has brought drag culture into the mainstream over 14 seasons now on VH1 and in multiple nations around the world. And if you're a fan of the show, then our next guest will leave you gagging. BenDeLaCreme is here. She's the star of season 6 of Drag Race, as well as the All-Stars 3. She's in town for her comedy tour. It's called Ready to Be Committed. We're not sure which kind of committed. We'll find out in a minute. At Big Night Live inside the Hub on Causeway, which is next to the TD Garden. BenDeLaCreme, Dela, it is great to meet you. Welcome.
It's so great to be here.
It's great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
I really
thank
appreciate
you
it.
very much.
And by the way, you look fat. You look unbelievable.
Fabulous.
But you know, I wanted to dress for radio.
I figured.
Well, we're on. We are on YouTube, so we do have some people
Hi,
watching on
YouTube.
YouTube. Yeah, that's right. So it's not just radio today. But tell us, you know, you've done versions of Ready to Be Committed before. So, but this is a new show. So tell us what people can see in Boston.
Yeah, so this show premiered in 2019 in New York, and then I did a run in Provincetown for the summer, and it was due to go on tour in spring of 2020, and I don't know, some personal things came up. So, so yeah, now it's a narrative show, and it's actually inspired by my relationship with my real life partner, who's here today. But,
let's hear him. He is here. Yes, indeedy.
And yeah, so it's a show in which Dela is looking for love and looking in all the wrong places, and it's sort of a narrative cabaret. So there's song, original music, dance, burlesque, puppetry, but it all is a narrative of her adventures through a love wonderland in which she meets a slew of characters.
Now, I don't want to criticize her for this, but just so I understand, she decides she's going to get married, but from what I read, she has no cake, she has no dress, and probably more importantly, no potential groom.
Yeah.
That's inhibiting, is it not?
No, it's really, I mean, she realizes early on that there's a lot of details to wedding planning that she's overlooked.
Yeah, including those, that's right.
Okay, and what about San Francisco?
How'd that go?
Oh, San Francisco is wonderful. Yeah, we just began the tour, and mostly we're in one city at a time, but we just did a week to sort of get this off the ground, and it was amazing. We had just wonderful sold-out audiences, and that's always been a community that I've really loved.
You know, can I get back to what Margery said a minute ago? When you started this thing in New York and then Provincetown, where we spent a ton of time, this is pre-pandemic, obviously broken up by the pandemic. So is the show different because of the nightmare of the last 2 years than it was had you seen it in the first round?
Well, you know, I've had a long time to really up the ante on the costumes, I'll tell you that much. Yeah, you know, the show is all about, you know, loneliness and looking for connection. And surprisingly enough, that seems to be something that's resonating especially hard with people right now.
Yeah.
So there's been some rewriting that really sort of digs into how we have really changed the sort of immediacy. The stakes are much higher of wanting that connection and how traumatizing it can be to be by yourself. And so, you know, Dela's got this fear of, you know, dying alone and being consumed by the cats she's collected over the years. And, you know, that's just become even more urgent.
And one of the cats is actually, I've read, a corpse-eating cat. Do you play the corpse-eating cat, or you don't?
In fact, I do.
I knew you would.
Yeah,
yes.
I play about 15 characters in this show, and I use a lot of different techniques, interactive video and puppetry. The corpse-eating cat is actually half my body, and we do a half and half dance where death comes for me in the form of a feline.
We're talking to BenDeLaCreme. She'll be performing her show Ready to Be Committed tonight at 7 at Big Night Live, which is right down by the TD Garden. You can get tickets at bignightlive.com. You know, for people that haven't seen RuPaul's All Stars, we have some great sound of BenDeLaCreme's best Maggie Smith impression from a round of Snatch Game. So why don't we play that sound?
Dame Maggie Smith, Cher, completely addicted to social media. Even her blank has a Twitter account.
Well, RuPaul, is it?
Yes, absolutely.
I understood virtually none of the words that left your lips moments ago, but I did hear the term Twitter, and I assume that it's some sort of a songbird.
Very close, not a match.
Now, that was a riot, a perfect Maggie Smith imitation, but I just wanted to tell you that Jim has a Maggie Smith connection, too.
I do, actually.
Yes, here's one of our regular guests, travel writer Chris Muther. He writes for the Boston Globe, explaining why he, in particular, would enjoy a tour of the buildings from New York City's Gilded Age to pair with the HBO show of the same name. Here it is.
Jim, I would recommend it for you because I think of you as the Maggie Smith of GBH. And so even though this is a different show, but it's by Juliette Kayyem, so I think you would enjoy walking around and saying, "What's a weekend?" and that sort of thing.
That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. And it was true, I should say. So a Maggie Smith connection here, BenDeLa.
We have so much in common.
It's stunning. We've only known each other for a few minutes.
That's right. That's great. There's great potential here. Would you like to do a little Maggie Smith?
No, I would not. But I do a RuPaul. Is that your name, RuPaul? Is that so? When I talked to you before we went on, that I spent a lot of summers in Provincetown for decades, actually. Obviously, drag is a whole different phenomenon today, in great part thanks to RuPaul, and we'll talk about RuPaul a bit more in a minute. Did you like it more when it was sort of the underground? Obviously, you couldn't be as big a deal as you are in that environment, but that was like a whole different cult thing that I thought was just fabulous. Is that lost, or has just been subsumed in this bigger thing?
Well, off the record, just between the three of us, yeah, it's I do miss the sort of nitty-gritty drag that sort of only could thrive in the shadows. At this, when I first saw some of the most incredible performances that I've seen, it was actually here in Boston. Varla Jean Merman at Machine nightclub, or Machine Hall as she called it at the time, was just such a huge inspiration. We just talked about Ryan Landry and the Gold Dust Orphans. I saw them do the Bad Seed, and all of that really expanded my mind as to what drag really could be.
One of the great scenes, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, Margery, is when there are a variety of parades on Commercial Street in Provincetown. You must love this. When the drag queens are all out on Commercial Street and a couple with kids from Iowa comes and they thought they went to the seaside resort. That's quite a moment, is it not?
Yeah.
What are they saying?
I don't know.
Oh, Dela, I'm sorry you have to leave. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
We have no idea. What are they saying here? Don't tell us it's an evacuate. There's an alarm kind of thing in the library.
Oh.
What's happening?
Well, aren't we close enough to the door?
It's a fire drill.
It's a fire drill.
Don't go yet. We'll tell you all in a minute. This is to the audience. We promise we'll give you good advice as soon as our colleague checks it out. Speaking of RuPaul, can we talk about a major moment for you? You have to speak really loudly, though, now.
Actually, this is going off because I just signaled that I didn't think the interview was going on, so I had them pull the alarm.
I do that all the time, actually. Wait a second. Are we supposed to... What's going on here?
Do we have to leave?
Okay. We're supposed to leave. Okay, now, everybody, we're going to run a pre-tape of something.
Oh, no.
Hopefully, Dayla can you stick around for a few minutes?
Listen, I have nowhere else to go.
Fine.
Good. Oh,
we'll
good.
return
Okay.
live.
Yes, we only got
absolutely.
didn't even get
As soon as
halfway
everything
through.
is taken care of, don't go away. We shall return. This is Boston Public Radio. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, but we've run into some technical problems. Until we can fix them, we're bringing you our recent interview with Alexandria Anoa. Alexandria is the Director of Political Advocacy for Black Boston. That's a nonprofit focused on fighting injustice and creating community in Boston's Black community. Alexandria, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. And these stories that you've highlighted are just, crazy. But before we get into that, what is Black Boston? What is it?
Yes, Black Boston was founded May 2020 by Black college-age women, and we decided that we wanted to stand in solidarity with the people of Minneapolis. So George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and all of the other Black lives that were lost. And we found it crucial to also understand that policing and the way policing is done in Boston needs to be fixed. So we organized a march to the State House advocating for police reform, and not just police reform, but also understanding that Black Bostonians are a part of Boston history, and really trying to tackle different issues. And now we are a nonprofit organization, and we do educational programming, outreach, civic work, and we're just gonna grow and grow. And we hope that we get to engage youth politically. And that is a part of my role as the Director of Political Advocacy.
Well, Alexandria, it's not the only thing you're advocating for, too. I'm sure everybody listening knows the term that Gwen Ifill popularized, missing white women syndrome, and obviously came most into play recently with Gabrielle Petito, which was a 24/7 story all over America. But you wrote a really compelling piece about the lack of attention to missing Black girls and women from the consciousness of most and the media. People who do what we do, at times I think we as well are to blame. Lay out your concerns and begin to touch on some solutions that you proposed as well, if you would.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I want to start off by saying that Black girls and women are deserving of love, light. And I think that's what I started with in the op-ed. And we have been socialized to believe that it is okay to infiltrate the spaces Black women and girls occupy just to confirm our stereotypes about them, which is unconscionable. And I think there are so many ideas. And when we think about the work of Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a legal scholar in intersectionality, really assessing what are the interlocking systems of oppression that are hindering the development of Black girls. And I think for Boston, like Massachusetts in general, we do have a data problem. And I offered in the op-ed, and I still today will say that we need a separate task force. We need a separate task force to protect Black women and girls and other young girls of color. Legislative measures and data collection that account for racial gender disparities of missing persons in Massachusetts is needed. And I do not believe that we have introduced legislation in the State House that actively is addressing this issue. Our Congresswoman, Ayanna Pressley, has done a fantastic job of introducing the Crown Act, which is making sure that Black women and girls are not being discriminated against on their hairstyles in school or being punished for wearing their natural hair. And I think that is one of many steps in promoting the development of Black women and girls. And I'm saying that we also need to have a separate task force to address human trafficking and missing Black girls, because those issues are inextricably linked. And I think we need to start having that task force and also equitable media coverage. When we think about Gabby Petito, there was an abundant amount of articles and op-eds written, and we are not seeing that for Black women and girls. And Gabby Petito and her family deserves that. And Black women Black women and girls deserve that spotlight as well.
If I can interrupt you for a second, one of the things that became so clear beyond the discriminatory treatment based upon color of skin of a missing woman or girl in the Petito situation, I don't know about you, Margery or Alexandria, the fact that the press not only covered that to the exclusion of almost everything else, but kept referring to her by her first name as if we all had an intimate, connection.
Talking about the missing white woman syndrome, I mean, this has happened over and over again. You may be too young to remember Natalie Holloway, who is another really good-looking blonde that was supposedly eaten by a shark, and Aruba, actually, I think her boyfriend murdered her. Gabby Petito, another really good-looking, young, blonde woman that we were obsessed with in the media, which is still, not coincidentally, run mostly by white men. But tell us the story of Cheryl Pringle of Woburn. Cheryl, excuse me. Cheryl Pringle of Woburn. This is a story that got very little coverage. We saw a few stories in the Boston Globe, but very little coverage. What was the story there?
Yeah, so Cheryl Pringle, and she was a Black woman from Woburn who was found missing. And I think her son reported that she went missing. And she was on I believe she was out. I don't know if it was, I'm not particularly sure the actual setting, but she was out with a loved one, and she ended up missing, and then her body was found dead. And I also want to acknowledge the work that our Representative Liz Miranda has been doing around that case and uplifting. That is a story that touches a lot of hearts, especially Black women, because this is something that it's like we get like these articles and there's social media posts every day, and then there's no investigation, there's no follow-up, and then what's the result is a life is lost.
Can I stop you, Alexander, just a second? I don't want to leave this Pringle thing for a minute. Let me read to you two things. You mentioned the son. Here's a quote from Mass Live. The family found her phone Sunday in Lynn and traced the route into the marshy area on Tuesday morning, where they found Pringle's purse, then her body several feet away, according to NECN. Her son is interviewed on NECN. Listen to this quote. Yeah. We did everything ourselves. You think the police found her? We found her. The family of Cheryl Pringle traced and found their dead mother, sibling, child. It's unbelievable.
Yes, I agree. It is unbelievable. And you bring up an excellent point about Black women and girls, the organizers in Boston, in Massachusetts, are usually the ones that have to fight for our freedom, our liberation. And that's why I really think that it is time for elected officials to start helping. This is not a one-person issue. This is a collective issue. This is communities, and Black women have been doing this since the test of time. In my op-ed, I talked about how Massachusetts has strong organizing roots. The Combi Collective was formed in Boston, and their coalition was built off of acknowledging that there are interlocking systems of oppression. And I think we need to get back to that. And I encourage elected officials to really take that document from the Combahee River Collective and implement that into policy. Like, how do we actually shift the conversation to really focus on centering Black women and girls? And I agree with you in that at this point, Black families are going to do whatever they need to do, but it is the responsibility of the elected officials to also have investigations like these to progress, and so that we can find justice. But not just justice. Justice also looks like having spaces and ecosystems that are safe for Black women and girls. So this is a whole idea of developing Black women and girls and promoting their well-being and bolstering their well-being. But I agree with you that it should not be on Black families, Black women and girls to fight for their own oppression. And it is a shame. And I'm very disheartened by the fact that the family had to do that work. And it just speaks to the level of disrespect. Mm-hmm.
Well, this case that you just mentioned in Woburn is obviously not unusual. There was another case we read about today, a young woman named Lauren Smith Fields, 23 years old, out on a date in her apartment with a 37-year-old white man. She's Black, he's white, and she's found dead again by the landlord, apparently, the next day. They think it was an accidental drug overdose. They're still doing an investigation. But as somebody pointed out in the story from the New York Times, let's reverse this. If this were a 23-year-old white woman with a 37-year-old black guy, I don't think that the family would have had to call the police themselves and beg from the detective, who has now been under investigation and is in trouble himself, but beg them for information about what happened to this young woman.
Yes. And that story touches me as well. I'm 24, and that could be me. That could be any of my family. That could be any of my friends. And it's, again, goes back to this idea about, Black girls are seen as hypersexual in a way that invites devaluation from others. Characteristics about Black girls and women based on a cultural stereotype that doesn't see Black girls as children, and doesn't see Black women as valuable as well. So when we have these cultural stereotypes because of social media and because of digital media and film, it presents this idea that it has deleterious consequences for the health of Black women. So in the case of Lauren Smith Fields, again, the fact that she is a Black woman, the fact that she is younger, and I also want to say that the photos that they chose to, present her is also telling too. Versus the photos of the white man. He was hiking, he had his backpack, but for her, they decided to show photos of her in more, provocative clothing, which is her business, and she's able to do that. But we have to really start to see what certain media outlets are piecing together to create a story that justifies or that gives a rationale for us to not care about Black women and girls.
We're talking to Alexandria Anoa.
Just one
she
thing.
is the director of political advocacy for Black Boston.
Just one thing, that Lauren Smith Fields story, I couldn't believe that the cops were talking about, the guy she was with may have been a nice guy, but it seemed a little premature for them to jump to the conclusion that he was a great guy.
You should explain, that's how they described him to the family, as
that's
a, quote,
how they
nice
described
guy.
him to the family, and they were on a date, and he claims that he called the police when he noticed she was not breathing, but it would warrant an investigation. It seems to me a little bit more
exactly. You bring up a great point. It's again this cultural stereotype. It's like who, and I said this in my op-ed, who is soft, who is nice, and all these different characteristics are labeled on Black women, then they're labeled on Black men as well. And as a society, we internalize that and we are socialized to believe that, which here we are.
In addition to the sort of invisibility, for lack of a better expression, of Black women and girls vis-a-vis what you're talking about, Alexandria, there was a great piece last October in the Washington Post by a woman by the name of Julia Jordan Zachary, in which she talks about, on one hand, it's invisibility, but on other days, it's hypervisibility. And what she's talking about, I'll read you a paragraph. Others have looked at hypervisibility, in which Black women are both disproportionately visible and associated with negative stereotypes that mark Black women as deviant and requiring increased surveillance. We see this with Black girls, who are often treated as adults in the school system, and we've discussed this before, and punished at disproportionately high rates. Obviously, you've seen that as well.
Yes, for sure. And I think for the listeners, please read Monique Morris's work. She is the author of Push Out, the Criminalization of Black Girls in Schools. And she really talks about this kind of educational disparity. And again, when we look at the cultural stereotype and when we look at the characteristics that are placed on Black girls, it seemed as deviant, seemed as, not complying or being rebellious. But the thing is, like, educators and other people that are viewing Black girls are not given the same care, the same grace. How about asking, what social supports do you need? How can I help you? Maybe something happened to you on the subway this morning. Someone made you upset, we really have to start treating Black girls and Black women as people. And I think I really want our elected officials, and I really want our elected officials to talk about the data, like how that is important. Rachel Rollins has talked about data pertaining to a lot of different issues, and I think this one warrants that as well.
We're talking to Alexandria Anohar, Director of Political Advocacy for Black Boston, is fighting injustice and creating community in Boston's Black community. You know, I'm just thinking back as you're talking about these assumptions of about sexuality in young Black girls and young women. I remember the R. Kelly case. So we learned during the course of his trial that his basically his buddies going to local high schools recruiting these young girls. It was an open secret for apparently for a long time. People knew about it, and failed to act.
Yes, I appreciate that you raised that, and it makes me also tie in community supports as well. So when I think about, like, if I think as a researcher, I'm always thinking about theories and models. But if I think about kind of like Black girls at the center and what is around it, it's elected officials, it's historical trauma, it's communities. And with communities also comes the people in our own racial group as well, and holding them accountable. I think that, again, Black girls are subject to predatory behavior from people that look like them as well. So we have race and gender inequalities within that entire context. And reflecting on the R. Kelly situation, it's unfortunate that because of power and because he's a man, that people did not feel the need that they should protect Black women and Black girls. If he's visibly visiting high schools, and he's visibly saying things in his music, and we're not paying attention to it because we like it, and we're afraid of cancel culture, we are doing a disservice to Black women and girls. So I think it's elected officials, but it's an entire community as well, if we want to promote the well-being and wellness of Black girls and women.
By the way, one of our colleagues just alerted us to the fact that newly inaugurated Rachel Rollins as U.S. Attorney will be with us on Monday. We'll bring this up. I have one last thing. You know, you talk a lot about data collection, which obviously is hugely important in almost anything, because if you don't have the facts in front of you, it's hard to develop a policy.
Right, exactly.
I don't know if you're familiar. I'm sure you are. I didn't know about this till this morning when Margery and I were talking in anticipation of you coming. There's this journalist, I think in California, I'm not sure, Erica Marie Rivers, who on her own has collected all this stuff. It's called Our Black Girls. If you Google that, can you spend a second and talk about the incredible work? This one-woman show, no support, no nothing, one-woman band. Can you just describe what she's doing right now?
Yeah, so she is creating a database, but I will be honest, I'm more familiar with, there's another woman that is organizing a Washington, D.C. march on Black femicide, and also that includes Black missing girls. And she's doing something very similar. I have heard of that name, but I will say it goes back to what you were saying about Black women and girls organizing and doing this work themselves, like doing the database themselves.
You know, let me just say one thing about it, because I went to the website. People should check it out, Our Black Girls. And the beauty of this, you know, it's analogous to that I can think of is that our friend Alex Goldstein has done this Faces of COVID Twitter account where he has done, you know, we all know how these people died. We don't often know, unless we're close to them, how they lived. And one of the things that this Rivers does terrifically well is not only do, and obviously it's not comprehensive, but it's as best she can, this database, but also tells you a little bit about the lives of these women. So they're not just another, you know, statistic. And it's really quite powerful. So check it out.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. And I also want to add that for data, that's an excellent point too, because for me, like numerical representations, that is my argument. I would definitely want numerical representations because it allows us to address problems, but also that qualitative piece of that narrative is important to tie it together.
Alexandria, one last question from me. We started this talking about the brilliant journalist that was on television for many years right here at PBS, Gwen Ifill, and the missing white women syndrome. But I'm wondering, it sounds to me like this is a fairly new movement, looking at the disparities of treatment between women of color and white women when they disappear, particularly when they're good-looking blondes that disappear. It sounds like this is fairly recent, and I'm wondering what happened to get that sort of movement going.
Yeah, I will say that I don't think it's that are doing grassroots work that I work with have been talking about it. It's just that it doesn't get coverage.
Yeah.
We need to approach media with an equity lens. I think, we've been talking about it. We've been posting about it. Black Boston, we had a campaign last April, I believe 2020 actually. We had a campaign, and it was called Boost Black Girls. And it was literally this exact op-ed, but in a campaign. It's like, call Mara Healy, talk to the Human Trafficking Center, talk to the Child Justice Unit. It was all of these different things. There was action steps for our community to take. So we've been talking about it. And that's why I was super excited to talk today, because we really need to start talking about it more explicitly so that our elected officials can keep up with us, because community organizers have been doing the work. We just need our elected officials to keep up with us.
We're really glad to meet you, and we're really glad for your work. We appreciate it, Alexandria.
Yeah.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you so much for your points. I enjoyed this conversation.
Oh,
we did too.
Thank you,
so
and
much.
shame on us for not having covered this as well as we should. Thank you, Alexandria, for
We'll
doing
have you
that.
back.
Okay.
Take care. Bye.
Alexandria Noha is the director of the Political Advocacy for Black Boston, a nonprofit focused on fighting injustice and creating community in Boston's Black community.
The city of Shanghai is under a strict COVID lockdown. It's also a major shipping port.
It's like super chaos theory. If you shut down, one ship in one place, what happens 3 months later?
I'm Ari Shapiro. The ripple effects of China's severe COVID lockdowns on the global economy this afternoon on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you and the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds for the citizens and businesses of the Commonwealth. You can see if you have unclaimed money at findmassmoney.com. And New England Dental Group, committed to helping you stop hiding your smile by offering a variety of dental implant solutions to replace missing teeth in one of their 7 locations. Learn more at newenglanddentalgroup.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim, Browdy, Margery again live at the Boston Public Library. As we were saying before, we were rudely interrupted by a fire alarm. That was real. You know that old saying from Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, Margery?
What's that, Jim?
Wherever BenDeLaCreme goes, alarms follow. Have you ever heard that?
Yep, that is constantly quoted back to me.
From justices,
Absolutely, yes.
So that is the voice of BenDeLaCreme, who is performing tonight at Big Night Live. It's right by the TD Garden. It's called Ready to Be Committed. You can get tickets at bignightlive.com. And in all seriousness, the reason for this 15-minute hiatus, while there was something playing, is there was a fire alarm. Everything is fine, assuming you're concerned here. And we return at the Boston Public Library.
Well, we started to talk about RuPaul before we went on the break. And this was the TV reality moment of the millennium, at least a contender, when BenDeLaCreme, that's you, eliminated herself from the 3rd season of RuPaul's All-Stars. Let's play this sound.
Dela, which of your All-Star teammates have you chosen to get the chop?
This is the easiest choice that I have had to make this entire season. I'm going home.
Okay.
What? Exactly. What?
I love.
Welcome back to all of you, by the way.
Back.
Thanks
Sorry
for staying
about
with us, by the way. Thank you.
So, I loved your critique of the show. Tell us why you came to that decision.
Yeah, it was really a, excuse me. It was interesting because Drag Race, of course, is now sort of the pinnacle of the art form that I've been in love with since years before it was incepted. And so really, if you want to sort of get to the peak of this industry, of this art, it's something you need to participate in. But of course, it's also reality TV, and they've They've created a lot of manufactured drama for the theoretical benefit of the viewers at home. And you are asked to, if you do well on the show, eliminate your fellow contestants and send them home. And I just kept on winning week after week. Imagine how mortified I was. But
Absolutely.
The downside to that was that I kept having to eliminate the queens that I was there with. And so there was this moment on the runway when I realized I'd proved myself by winning most of the challenges, and I had nothing left to prove. And so it was sort of a realization that I had done well enough in the competition to say, hey, I can win this thing, I can do well at this thing, but I do not agree to the terms, and that's a pretty rare opportunity.
Dela, I don't know if you know, because you hadn't met us till before, you know that a couple of years ago I asked that Margery be eliminated from this show, actually.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And it was a mess. I don't want to talk about it, but it was for both of us, by the way. So you're doing a one-queen show. I mean, you've done a lot of stuff with other people. I have to say, I've said this, that gives me hives. I mean, the whole notion, I'm totally serious. Standing up on a stage by yourself. Now, admittedly, you're playing 15 different characters, including, if you just tune in, a corpse-eating cat. How many actors have ever done that? How is that intimidating? Are you okay with that?
Well, this is the fourth solo show that I have written and performed over the years. The first one I did, definitely, I was maybe a few weeks out from opening that show. It was called Terminally Delightful back in 2000. Oh, I don't even know what. But I thought about feigning sick. I mean, I was, coming up with every way to not step out on that stage. But it's a thrill, and the more shows I write and perform, the more I love it. And it's such a unique opportunity to entertain people and make them laugh, but also, one of the things I love about camp is you can bring people on a journey, and I love to address more serious topics through that laughter. So,
okay, we're talking to BenDeLaCreme, performing her show Ready to Be Committed tonight at 7 at Big Live by the TD Garden. You can get tickets at bignightlive.com. You were born a very kind of Puritan name, Benjamin Putnam, in the family farmhouse down in Litchfield, Connecticut, a rural area. Talk a little bit about that. You're practically a founding father, the kind of thing.
Yes, very much. Oh, yeah. No, I come from one of those very sort of traditional New England families where there's, 47 relatives who all gather together for these sort of grandiose, tight-lipped family get-togethers where everyone pretends they enjoy each other's company. But Litchfield was a more conservative place for a child like me to grow up, and I was always, as one might imagine, flamboyant to a point where I could not hide that. And it was difficult, but I had very supportive parents, and when you are not really welcomed into social circles, you spend a lot of time by yourself and you get very creative. And I think that those early days of I would create little plays and force my cousins to perform in them, and you get really imaginative. I drew a lot, I wrote a lot, and I think that really influences what I do now.
Traditional New England family where the kid is dressing up as Marsha Brady.
That's right.
That's a typical. But that was your first. That's what I read. It was your first deal, Marsha Brady, right?
Yes. I used to. I mean, there were always bed sheets and bath towels making dresses and wigs in my home. But the first time I actually set foot outside, I decided Marsha Brady. It was a Halloween, and I was far too old to go trick or treating, but I did it anyway because any excuse to be fabulous. I forced a female friend of mine to dress as Greg, and we made the rounds.
So Dela, you talked about before we went on the air. You talked about how you went to a high school, which was really a transformation in your last couple of years. But you gave some advice in one of these stories I read to teenagers, which I thought was quite moving. Tell us what you said.
Well, I've said so many things to teens.
I've given so much advice through the years.
You talked about, you had a line, and all you think is wrong is exactly what's right about you, and learning to live with depression. Those are two big things teenagers deal with.
Yeah. I mean, growing up isolated and struggling with depression. Since I was very young, and people often ask, oh, well, how did you beat it? How did you get over it? And I don't think that's something you get over. I think it's something you learn to navigate. And that's true of any sort of early negative life experience. You incorporate it into who you are. And, and so young people who are struggling and feeling like they're alone and there's these things that are weighing down on them. I mean, all those things that contributed to those feelings as a young person for me as an adult are the things I'm celebrated for.
Yeah.
And they're they're all the things that, I'm going to get to step on a stage tonight and have people appreciate and laugh and applaud. And, if I could travel back in time and tell my younger self what this life gets to be, I don't think I possibly could have comprehended it, but I think young people need to hear that there is a future out there for them, and they need to be able to just imagine that, what if the best case scenario, because it's hard.
So if you travel back in time, for example, you might be Mary Tyler Moore instead of Marcia Brady. That's the kind of thing. So every time, okay, can we stop with the serious conversation with you and Margery?
Okay.
Could you describe the dress you're wearing? Because not everybody is watching on YouTube, nor are they at the library. So for the people at home, in their car, at work, what are you wearing today? What's your selection?
Just a simple morning frock. A fishtail gown, white lace, white ostrich feather.
Yeah.
I am getting married tonight on stage.
That's right.
Apparently.
Pure
That's right.
as the driven snow.
And I did. We were out at the fire drill, and I followed BenDeLaCreme back into the studio after the fire drill and noticed how beautifully cinched waistline and quite formidable derriere. And I asked her how she managed that so well. How did you?
Yeah, well, it's very simple. You get some mattress foam. An electric turkey carver is a really efficient way to start hacking away at it. And with enough pairs of Capezio dance tights, it all just turns into a beautiful natural illusion.
It looks lovely.
Okay, so Dela, before you go, ready to be committed. If people weren't here before the fire alarm, tell us a little bit about what you're doing tonight, what you're going to do on the 21st on Thursday in Portland. We'll tell you about that location too. What are they going to get tonight at Ready to Be Committed?
Yeah, well, it's if you've been to a drag show before, it's everything you want out of a drag show, and you've never been to a drag show before, it's a lot of things you're not going to know you wanted until you see them. But, I play 15 different characters. It's all done through comedy, original music, burlesque, puppetry, and it's a lot of fun, laughs, humor, but really at its heart, it's a show that's about, our struggles with being alone and, love and how difficult those things can be, and the way that some of those things make us force us to look at our own mortality. But, it's all told through, blue humor. And
how do you think you look, by the way? I just saw the screen. Can we get a close-up? Yeah. Well, how do you think you look?
There's nothing like noon daylight streaming in through the windows to really compliment drag, let me tell you.
It's really very difficult for us all, believe me.
Can I tell you, this is a thrill for us.
It is a thrill.
We're really excited to meet you. It's great to meet you, and you lived up to all of our expectations and more. It's great to see you.
It's
so
now,
good to be here. I'm going to announce tonight in a second, but I want to make sure that I get this right. The State Street Theater in Portland, Maine.
Theater.
The State Theater. State Theater in Portland, Maine, Thursday, the 21st of April. You're going to be there then. Okay.
I will be.
Okay. And tonight, BenDeLaCreme will be performing her show, Ready to Be Committed, at 7 o'clock. Big Night Live next to the TD Garden. You can get tickets at bignightlive.com. Thank you so much. Really a thrill to meet you. Thank you very much for coming in, Dela.
You're great.
Coming up, get back to the news of the day with national security expert Juliette Kayyem. She joins us next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And the Trustees, presenting the New England Triennial 2022, featuring 25 New England artists. Now open at Fruitlands Museum and De Cordova Sculpture Park and Museum. More at thetrustees.org/triennial. And Unicare, a health partner for the servicemen and women of Massachusetts, providing comprehensive programs and digital tools focused on keeping them healthy and allowing them to get the most out of life. UnicareMass.com.
Trusted, local news. This is 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Margery again. We're live from the Boston Public Library. The proof of that was we had a fire alarm, and I think we're out of business for about 20 minutes. We are streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. BenDeLaCreme is leaving, creating quite a stir on the way out the door, I should say. On a pretty serious note, Russia attacks are accelerating. Yeah. We now know that they're also hitting a place that was perceived to be relatively safe, Lviv in the western part of the country. President Zelensky is saying that the West promise to never forget has been forgotten. Joining us now to discuss the state of affairs there is Juliette Kayyem. Juliette's a former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security under President Barack Obama, faculty chair of the Homeland Security program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. Her new book is The Devil Never Sleeps, Learning to Live in an Age of Disasters. And probably, speaking of disasters, most important, she fed 26 people at her house one night this weekend.
Impressive.
Can we hear it for Juliette?
Very impressive.
Thank you. So before we go ahead, I know this is a bit of a digression. I'm at Whole Foods. Was it Friday or Saturday?
You saw me Friday. I was pretty calm.
Okay, Friday. There was a woman who had a cart that was fuller than any food shopping cart I've ever seen. I see her from behind, and I'm just curious to see what is with this woman. Lo and behold, who was it but Juliette Kayyem?
Yes.
Who were you cooking for all of Eastern Massachusetts? Exactly.
Who wasn't I cooking for?
How'd that go?
Everything went great. It was a holiday, the marathon, lots of visitors, randoms, and it was, there are these, it was wonderful, but I will tell you, I used to host a lot before COVID, and this was like the first weekend where it was all in, and I loved it.
Before we get to the subject at hand, I just read a book recently where I learned some new terms, and the terms I'll apply to this. I would say the dinner, the inevitable disaster, the boom, was the dinner.
Yes.
You can't prevent the dinner. That's left of boom. So the goal is right of boom to limit the fallout, the damage. Were you able to limit the damage?
Wine helps. We don't talk about anything too serious.
Well, I was
great
impressed.
fun.
I really was.
So embarrassed, because it really was one of those obscene shops. Because I was just so nervous that I wasn't going to have enough food.
26 people is a lot of people. I'm so impressed. I would be getting takeout, is what I would be doing.
Wow,
that's what I said. Actually, we're talking to Juliette Kayyem.
So Juliette Kayyem, let's get back to Ukraine and Russia. I've read so many things that are discouraging, not just the slaughter and the carnage and the ruination of a country, but that the Russian economy is not as damaged as we hoped it was going to be, which is a very bad thing, that the European countries, several of them, are not going to get off Russian oil and gas until 2030 in some cases, which is a long time away. And so I'm a little discouraged at this point about where this is going.
Well, I think that's the right question, is that where is this going? Because I don't think we write the end. I don't think we know what the end story is. So if you thought, remember, most commentators thought this was going to be an easy victory for Russia, and that basically he would stay in Ukraine and Kiev would fall within a week or two or three at most. Then the story is more complicated. It means that the combination of sanctions and the Ukrainian resistance and the arms and the isolation of Russia actually has succeeded in some ways, and that his story is going to be some limited victory for him. Horrible human rights abuses as he creates a narrative that this is sort of denazification or whatever it is, abuses against women as we're reading as well, bombarding the East, but not getting Kyiv. So is that a victory? Of course not. I mean, it's just a horrible situation. But remember what we were saying 2 months ago, and then it's hard to say that combination of efforts didn't change Putin's long-term strategy. And that's, as we say, a victory of sorts in a horrible situation.
Can we play sound of President Zelensky? He was with Jake Tapper on CNN. Tapper, obviously, from CNN, was in Kyiv. And the first voice, obviously, you'll hear is Tapper, and then the president of Ukraine. Here it is.
When the world says never again, do they ever mean it?
I don't believe the world. After we see what's going on in Ukraine. After escalation of Russia, we don't believe our neighbors. We don't believe all of this. Even I don't believe documents, because we also had a Budapest memorandum. I think you know all the details of this. For me, that is just a piece of paper and costs nothing, and that's it.
You know what worries me in wake of that comment, and Juliette, we've had this discussion with you and a lot of people, Congress people and others, about Ukraine. One of the reasons why we're not doing more militarily is obviously this World War III threat, the nuclear threat, that sort of thing. And what we've been told is that we've been warned by, the West has been warned by Putin, that one, providing air cover would be seen as a declaration of war. Providing troops would be seen. Well, in the last few days, it's been an underplayed story. Putin or somebody in the Russian government leadership said they saw the United States providing certain weaponry, weaponry to Ukraine was seen as a crossing a line. Yeah. So will he get to dictate on that front as well? And if he doesn't, then why is it that we can violate that threat of his and we can't violate the threat to provide air covers so that missiles can't destroy all these communities?
I mean, you're exactly right that it's a myth, it's a fiction, that our weapons are killing Russian soldiers. So is there a benefit for de-escalation in having that one barrier between sort of potentially direct conflict and war, essentially, with Russia? And I think the calculation is, however much you can say this is just a fictitious barrier, our weapons are in fact killing Russian soldiers. It's an important fictitious barrier, I think, for purposes of de-escalating, for purposes of keeping the Europeans engaged. We don't know where all the Europeans would be on this, let alone keeping China from doing what China could do and hasn't done yet, which is it's not a full throttle endorsement of the Russians. It's we're going to waver until we can figure out an exit strategy for them. So once again, if you just think of what the storyline was just about a month ago and how easy this was going to be, and he was unstoppable, and then Finland was going to be next or whatever, that storyline is over. It's not ideal where we are, but I'm not ready to say just because he's alive and well that this is a victory for him. And I think and what he's seen is, whatever his long-term strategy is in Ukraine, it is going to bump up against a resistance that's going to make the Iraqi resistance look, like softball, right? I mean, this is an armed citizenry that stayed put. They are not going to let Russian soldiers live for very long if they can get their hands on them, and that's the resistance he's going to have to calculate that his predecessors calculated in Afghanistan.
Let's move to China. You just mentioned China. China has really been cracking down on COVID. People are in their houses. These incredible stories about these truckers that have been stranded, like for days and days and days, unable to move, and they have no money, and they're running, and the goods the goods that they're transporting. Of course, some of them are perishable. So, what's the deal? It's going to be this is potentially the disruption to the supply chain that one should worry about. I don't know how much the U.S. needs to worry about it right now. We have other supply chain issues, but the zero COVID policy by the Chinese government in Shanghai is like nothing we've ever seen before. I don't get it. I'm looking at it. I don't get it. But they are going to eradicate this thing and then isolate the city because it's their largest economic boon. It's their largest trade center. So they essentially are just making a calculation. We're going to make this hurt for 2 weeks because they started to see not a surge but a spike, right?
It's been a month already.
It's been a month.
In Shanghai.
Right. It's Shanghai, and that is I don't get it anymore. I mean, I really don't. You know how I feel about this. I mean, we're not seeing any variants that are immune from the vaccine. There's a larger story here, which is China, in its complete arrogance about its own vaccine, has refused to which is not very successful, has refused until recently to allow, I guess you say, Western vaccines into China, into Shanghai in particular, to better protect their population. So they're basically doing this because they recognize that their vaccine may not protect the populations, which you think, okay, there's a solution here, and the solution is to China can afford it, to buy, you know, Moderna, whatever it is, to buy the vaccines that are proving strong enough over the long term, and then continue with the booster. So this is, they made this calculation, the combination of the vaccine and COVID-0.
You know, the best description of what's going on in Shanghai, I don't even know the reporter's name, and you may not either. It's a colleague of yours at CNN who lives in Shanghai.
Matthew Chance, yeah.
Is that who it is?
Matthew Chance, yeah.
And essentially, he and 25 million people are locked in their houses. And you can't, in most settings, you can't even go out for food.
Yeah.
And on the rare circumstance when you are allowed out on the street for food, they give you a box with a couple of carrots, a couple of potatoes, and if one case is discovered, one positive, in your catchment area, then everybody's locked back in their facilities. Right. Some of those people starving. Now, the positive part of this, the bad news, not only for the Chinese people and for the supply chain, as you described, the good news is, I know nothing about business. I'm emulating Margery, who says I don't know about this. I know nothing about business.
So many things I know nothing about. The list is long.
And me too. It is shocking to me that it took this long for the masters of the universe, the big business boys for the most part, to figure out you can't rely on one country as your primary source for any materials. Right. So the good news out of this nightmare, it seems, with China, and the nightmare for the Chinese people, is there's going to be a great diversification of sourcing. Is there not?
Absolutely. And as well as, I mean, this is very equivalent to Germany and its energy dependence on Russia. If there's going to be any long-term policy shifts, it's going to be, we cannot be dependent, 80% of our food supply. And we're going to, I mean, look, it can't be dependent on a single source. We're going to, the ripple effects of COVID with Ukraine, and you're starting to see in some of the economic forecasts, which are looking more grim. You know, we were sort of gangbusters 6 months ago, which are looking grim now. That combination of COVID with Ukraine and its impact, not on those countries, but on supply chain and economic flow, is going to be felt throughout the rest of the year. Because if you think about grain in Ukraine and what's that impact on Africa, and it just it just shows that one person or two people in this case can have tremendous impact on how the globe governs.
We're talking to Juliette Kayyem, a national security expert. Juliette, this was a startling story from Forbes, a great business magazine, talking about, until very recently, motor vehicle accidents were the #1 cause of accidental deaths among American children and young adults. Now it's gun-related injuries. So guns are the leading cause of death of children and young adults in the United States. This won't, of course, result in any legislation, I am sure, but it's a pretty startling statement. And a lot of these are accidental.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So
brother kills brother.
Brother, suicide. So handgun deaths, predominantly still suicide. I think it's still #1. But for children, it is lawfully purchased guns that are, loosely in the house, and someone's goofing off or someone's playing around and shoots a sibling or a cousin or sometimes a parent. The NRA decided long ago. NRA, which I read a book about the history of NRA, and it was I think by Tim Mack of NPR. It's just a terrific book. And
because it used to be like, let's have little gun clubs and let's learn how to be safe with guns.
It was about safety culture. It was they were created for safety. It was created for safety culture under the belief that the more people who owned guns, the more responsible you wanted them to be. That changed over the course of the politics of the 80s and 90s, and they not only went against gun purchasing legislation, but safety regulations. In other words, could I hold a parent culpable for negligence for giving a kid access to a gun. There are a couple cases out there. One of the big school shootings that we saw, they're going after the parents for allowing a kid that they clearly
They're
knew.
still incarcerated.
Yeah, they're still incarcerated. They clearly knew that the kid should not have access to a gun. In fact, they knew it during the school shooting. And we'll see how that unfolds legally. That's a new negligence standard, so you don't need legislation. The courts can begin to interpret negligence to mean negligence is having a 4-year-old or having a psychologically disturbed 17-year-old and leaving your gun in your door. So, and it's the NRA is just, the polling is so strongly in favor of gun safety culture that it's actually just like this middle lane that you could that can be owned, and it's just no one's willing to own it because it just gets into the huge fights about gun purchasing.
With one exception, often when you talk about gun horrors, you say, well, there's no solution unless there's some big legislative push, which there's not about to be. So I have two things to say. I mentioned this, I know, to you. I don't know if I said it to you. I had John Rosenthal, who's this brilliant leader of Stop Handgun Violence. That was the sign on the turnpike forever that had to be moved. And he joined me a few weeks ago with David Hogg, who's one of the most important, obviously, activists on this front from Parkland. Everybody knows who he is. And when I talked to Hogg about solutions, the most depressing thing, and this is not far off from what he said, I'm not quoting verbatim, is we essentially said we have to wait for your generation to die. Yeah. Meaning that it is so hopeless that, and the young generation is so good on these issues, that he's essentially written off the boomers and middle-aged people, and that's one, which is so depressing.
It's not just guns, by the way, it's climate as well.
That's exactly right. But you know what the second thing is, which drives me out of my mind? There is smart gun technology that would guarantee that a kid could never kill his parent or a kid. It's
the fingerprint.
There's a fingerprint thing, and while a lot of the gun manufacturers say the technology is imperfect, from what I read, it's not only close to perfect, but close enough that the worst that happens is what already happens. Right. That's number one. And number two, my recollection was, and somebody, if you could check this, I think there was a store in New England where the
smart
owner
gun guy
had the courage to start selling smart guns. This was 3 or 4 or 5 years ago.
I think it was less than that.
Maybe so. And essentially the NRA put them out of business. They urged all their members to boycott the store. And I think the guy was put out. But the technology is there to ensure that no kid ever kills another human being unless they do it intentionally. Right, obviously, it's just which is not the primary purpose. I mean, primary reason anymore. The purposeful. It's the accident. So of course,
it is the decision to go after gun safety as compared to gun ownership. Was decisive by the NRA in the 1980s, and they'll never look back. I mean, to them, there's no such thing as an unsafe gun, only unsafe 4-year-olds. You're going to blame a 4-year-old for being unsafe. Yep, we are, right? I mean, that's the nature of the 4-year-old.
So I have one last thing for you, Juliette Kayyem. We're going to talk to John King a little bit about this in a couple of minutes. Our schedule's a little changed today because of the fire alarm thing here. Donald Trump has endorsed a ton. The reason I'm asking you this question is you were of the opinion that as long as they thoroughly and heavily prosecute the insurrectionists, it's going to tamp down some of that behavior. And I think you've been proven right. Doesn't mean the nuts still aren't there, but at least mini insurrections around the country, attempts to kidnap Governor Whitmer, even though they were acquitted, are happening less. So one more prediction before you go. If Donald Trump's primary nominations, where he has either endorsed a Republican, obviously, in a contested race for an open seat, like the governor of the Senate seat from Ohio, where he endorsed J.D. Vance, or in a contested race with an incumbent, like where he's endorsed the former senator who lost Purdue in Georgia against the incumbent Kemp, because Kemp was not solid enough in saying how the election was stolen. Right. If he loses a bunch of those races, what's the impact of Donald Trump the day after? Is it minimized, or does nothing take the bloom off the rose?
It is minimized. You're starting to see some of that internal and somewhat public criticism of Trump's endorsements from within the Republican Party with J.D. Vance and then, of course, Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania, which he may go back and forth on. That's the other thing is that you just can't never be sure of a Trump endorsement. Like he could turn around, but where
he endorsed Mo Brooks, and then, because even though Mo Brooks thought the election was stolen, he said we should look ahead. That was his sin.
Yeah, that was his sin.
So we don't endorse him anymore.
And Hope Hicks, I thought he was so fond of Hope Hicks, that beautiful young woman that worked in the White House. She works for the other guy that's running against Oz.
You can't ever make him happy. This is the Republicans could have shut this down on January, or I guess I would say in November. And then I always just go back to that line that was quoted in a big New York Times or some piece. The anonymous Republican is, "What does it hurt to cater him for a little bit?" And it hurts a lot. Right? I mean, they could have shut this down, and McConnell was willing to for about half a minute, and this nonsense down, and now they're going to suffer for it. And here's the interesting thing that I'm watching I'm not watching violence happily. If you create a party that does not view any election as legitimate, except for the one in which your candidate won, what happens in primaries where a Republican wins legitimately, but the conspiracy theorist does not? You're going to have a Republican on Republican
That's a great point.
blank show. And I'm just like, give me the popcorn. They created this, and if it brings them down, I mean, it might bring all of us down. But if it brings the primary process down as a result, not like you didn't have evidence that this man is never happy.
Juliette, thank you.
Thank you very
Bye,
much, Juliette
everyone.
Kayyem.
Bye.
Juliette
I have to say
Kayyem.
one thing. You never asked me you never asked us what we're wearing.
No, we never.
Speaking of that, you know what I just got? I just got a text.
She's got a great dress on.
I just got a text from one of my coworkers from Greater Boston, Courtney, who said on the YouTube channel, you know what most of the comments are about?
What?
Jim Browdy wearing his Mr. Rogers
cardigan.
cardigan.
He's in his cardigan.
What are you wearing, Jim?
He's in his cardigan.
What are you wearing?
So sad.
Okay, see you
both
guys later.
look fabulous.
Thank
by
you.
the
That's
way.
all we care
Well,
about.
I wear the same thing every day.
And by the way, we should have said this before. Juliette is hosting a dinner for 26 at her house tonight. You go to JulietteKayyem.com.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can win a free place.
We won't
at the
even
dinner
notice.
table.
Okay,
see you later.
See you later. Bye,
Juliette Kayyem is former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security under President Barack Obama and the faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. Her new book, and she's done a great job with this book, is The Devil Never Sleeps, Learning to Live in an Age of Disasters. Coming up, we're going to get an explainer about NFTs. You don't know what those are? Well, Jared Bowen, Executive Arts Editor here at GBH, is here to explain what they mean in general and in the art world. You are listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and Friday from the Boston Public Library.
Thank you to all who donated during our recent membership campaign. Because of your contribution to GBH, we can continue to bring you the world news that is so vital at this time. And now, through our Matching Gifts program, you can double the impact of that donation. Visit gbh.org/matchinggifts to view the list of participating companies. If your employer participates, then your donation could go twice as far. That's gbh.org/matchinggifts.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Comcast, Xfinity Internet is committed to bringing speeds over a gig to power your devices while fitting your needs and a range of budgets. Learn more at xfinity.com/gig. And Celebrity Series, presenting Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, April 28th through May 1st at the Bach Center Wang Theater. New works, Ailey classics, and revelations at every performance. CelebritySeries.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Jim Browdy. She's Margery, and we're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming on YouTube.com/GBH News. And yes, I am wearing a Mr. Rogers cardigan.
He is.
Joining us now.
Stunning.
I made it clear myself, Margery. Thank you. Joining us now, it's comfortable. Joining us now to discuss the latest in arts and culture events around Boston, and apparently, allegedly, to try to explain the unexplainable NFTs, is GBH's Executive Arts Editor. That'd be Jared Bowen. Hello, Jared Bowen.
It's great to be with you, Mr. Rogers. At least you don't have the shoes.
Thank
the
you.
shoes are different. The shoes are pretty cool.
Actually, true. That's
yeah, you
true.
could sing a little song about our neighborhood or something.
I did.
Like
I'm
that.
going to do that at the end of the show. Actually,
Okay.
right before we end.
So this is from Open Studio last week. This is Jared's show, which is on every Friday night, 8:30 here on GBH. We're talking about NFTs. NFT artist Ann Spalter, the great Washington Post art critic Sebastian Smee, who used to be at the Globe and tragically he left, and director George Fifield on Open Studio talking about NFTs.
NFTs are a new way to sell and buy and show that you own a piece of digital artwork.
It's a token, or I think of it as like a certificate of authenticity that exists online.
Art is perfectly, suited to it because it's digital, because it can be copied easily, and because you want to have something which lets everybody know I own this.
Okay, I hate to be thick as a brick, but
Thank you.
I
Me
still
too.
don't get it because it's like not something. I can see it, but I can't hold it and touch it and feel it.
It's a very difficult concept to grasp. Of the three that you just heard, Sebastian and George Fifield at Boston Cyber Arts both said, we're still grasping this, even though they spent a lot of time with it. Ann Spalter understands it's more. So basically, this is, an NFT can be anything. It can be a clip of a TV show. It can be a tweet, as we just learned. It can be a piece of art.
That would be Jack Dorsey's first tweet. We talked about that the other day.
Which didn't turn out to be worth much.
Exactly.
Well, it was $3 million the first time, just $280 the third time.
Right.
But go ahead.
So it's a non-fungible token, and what it is basically it's the digital piece of artwork that when it's in the art realm, it's a digital piece of artwork that you then own. That doesn't mean that it can't be replicated 4 billion times over and that everybody in the world can have one, but you just own the one with a certificate of authenticity, as you just heard, that has been sold using cryptocurrency. And so everything is recorded on a digital ledger, otherwise known as the blockchain, so then you know who owns what. Now, I will say that this is significant when it gets resold because people may not realize this. If you create a painting and you're an acclaimed artist and you sell it to someone who then 20 years later sells it at auction, the artist never gets any of that money. And so especially if you're an artist who blows up and you sold your painting for $500, but at Christie's one day it sells for $20 million, again, the artist gets none of that money. However, with NFTs, there's basically a built-in royalties system because of the blockchain, so then the artist can get somewhere in the neighborhood of 10%.
Unless the artist is dead 300 years.
Exactly.
So I have a bunch of questions. Where is it written? I love that concept. I heard that on your interviews. I love the concept of the original artist getting something for what he or she did down the line. What is the entity, or who is the entity that superimposes that requirement on the NFT world? Who decides that the original creator gets 10% of a subsequent sale?
I don't have the answer to that.
Okay, great. Number two.
We may have just run through what I can explain to you.
Number two, and this was a point made by one of your guests. I watched this closely because I actually really wanted to understand. I understand a little better than I did. I'm still not there, but I do understand a little better. It was a good segment, actually. One of your guests, I can't remember which one it was, said one of the other problems is you got to purchase this stuff with cryptocurrency. And as all of us know, even those who understand nothing about cryptocurrency, one day it's $55,000 a Bitcoin. The next day it's $192. I'm exaggerating, a Bitcoin. So in light of the fact that the currency is always changing, doesn't that screw up the whole non-fungible token deal too?
It does, and this is the point that George Fifield made.
Fifield, that's who it was, that's right.
Director of Boston Cyber Arts, is that you have a volatile market in art where it can just change on a whim. If you have a group of investors who decide that they want to make an artist popular, in the art world, this happens. People get behind it and they orchestrate certain things so that they can drive up the value for galleries, and then, of course, the artist, but the investors who have collected this art. And then if it's physical art, a lot of times they just store it in warehouses because this is an investment and really not about appreciation. So you have a market that's volatile, and then you have a currency that's equally volatile. So then you have these two coming together, and you don't necessarily know where you stand. Actually, I'll have to tell you, as I was sitting with my editor, Maureen, when we were putting this piece together the other day, we started to look at certain sites and try to figure out what equivalency there was in cost, and it's a really difficult formula to try to figure out the price versus the value of the currency in that moment.
So here's my third relatively intelligent question, I think. I understand, as you said a minute ago to Margery, so you have this digital art, it is certified in some fashion as the quote original, which gives it greater value. And there, as you said, there can be a million other copies. The difference is, to me, in the physical art world, you can own the Mona Lisa for $500 billion or whatever it would go for, or you can get a copy of the Mona Lisa. All of us understand the original and the copy are different entities, but the digital original and the digital copies are exactly the same,
That's the
except for the
problem.
certification. She's trying to piggyback on my question now. You can't
Well,
do that.
no, I started with that question,
how do you-
actually,
what is
Jim.
that about? By the way, the beauty of this, if you're not at the library, Jared Kayyem, his chest is pumped out because he's going to explain NFTs for us, and now we're kicking his behind. Are we doing a great job, or are we doing a great job?
Okay, only one of the three questions so far could I not answer.
Well, how about this one? Can you answer this one?
Well, there isn't an answer. This is what is kind of
It's
bewildering to a lot of people,
absurd.
that you have the same file. It's not like a lithograph, which is sold, and
That's why
if an artist creates a print edition of, say, 15 lithographs, and they're working with their studio and their printmakers, and sometimes they're hand touching them themselves. The artist's hand is there.
Yes.
You also know that you're buying a limited edition. With digital, yes, you can have the same exact quality. My Mona Lisa can be the same as yours, even though you paid the $60 trillion, and I just had somebody surreptitiously
So why is that a
email it to
greater?
me.
Why do I
I think
feel
this is
better
a-
if I own the quote original digital art that is
Because you're a
certified?
sucker. That's why. I think this is a short-lived scam. I really do.
Well, you asked that question, didn't you?
So I asked if it was a fad,
Fad,
and George
yes.
Fifield again said it could be a bubble, and this
Yeah.
could be the issue here. However, there are museums who are trying to figure out ways to incorporate the NFT realm and more digital art into their institutions. And this is what may get lost in all of this. You mentioned Ann Spalter, who's the digital artist, Brooklyn-based digital artist who we had on the show, and she sees this as validation for the work that she has been doing for years and years and years, along with her peers. George Fifield, for years and years and years, has been looking at computer art, decades. Of computer art when it wasn't taken seriously. They liken this to photography. When photography first came to the fore in the art world, people said this wasn't
Bless you,
actually
Margaret.
art. This isn't painting. You can just snap a picture, you click a button, and this produces art, so it's not art. They liken the same thing. Of course, that changed for photography, and the expectation is that will change for digital art as well. NFT ultimately is really more about the business side of things than it is about the actual creation and ownership.
Business meaning value of the
Right.
quote original.
Right. It's more like the gallery system, although this could circumvent the gallery system.
And
because
who
you
is-
could buy directly from the artist.
One last question, I think.
I
I'm
have
not
one last
sure.
question.
Okay, one last from me. Which is the authority that determines that piece of digital art is to be the certified original one? And if I were that certifier and on a screen I had 10 copies of this, would I know, without the certification mark, would I know the difference between the 9 copies and the one original?
You know this through the blockchain.
Well,
So
there.
you have to be familiar with the blockchain
Are
in
you?
order to go. No, I don't know how to buy Bitcoin and things of that nature. But this is how. And Ann Spalter said to me, yes, it's difficult to learn, but once you learn it, you become familiar with it. But that is your record. That's how you know you own the one.
Okay, and one last thing. I just could be old-fashioned and out of it, but even with a photograph, if you go, and we've all gone to see photographic displays in museums, that is much different than looking at a photograph, the same photograph on your computer or even on your TV set if you have a big screen TV. So I guess that's what I don't get. It's that
You mean the quality of the image
well,
you're talking about?
no, just being next to the real thing. There's something about that to me is what makes going to museums. We can all look at a million pictures in our art history books of the Mona Lisa, or you can look at a million pictures of A, B, C, or D, but it's different when you go and you're close to them and you see them. I don't know.
Well, I happen to find video art very mesmerizing, and maybe I'm using an even differenter term than digital art and NFTs, but this is one way to display NFTs is on monitors, in gallery walls, and some of this work is so enchanting, it draws you in. There are really interesting things that artists can do, and that I think is ideal. But you asked the question, the real thing, do you necessarily see the artist's hand, their physical hand? Can you see brushstrokes and whatnot? No, not really.
No, but
I
you
guess
know
in
that the
photography,
artist was close to it,
Right.
and you know that the person took this picture and realized this is a great, and they.
Well, how about an immersive art exhibit, which we've talked to
Well,
Jared about a lot?
I was
the
gonna
artist's
ask you about
hand is
that.
not on that.
Well, no, and you had this done with the Van Gogh things.
Yeah.
But that's, to me, that's a creation of the art, making it immersive.
and with
But-
photography, it's a little more removed because if you start to pay attention to the lighting and the shadows, then you understand what the photographer, if it is a structured portrait, or a photograph, what they've organized for you and how the art has come into view.
Yeah.
So
So I don't know. I guess I'm
before
just out of it.
Before we return to planet Earth, here's
Won't be the first
true
time.
test. Of those of you in the audience here, I'm not going to ask you to do this, so don't get nervous. Raise your hand if you think in 30 seconds you could intelligently describe digital art non-fungible token. Raise your hand. That would be none of it. Thank you. Thank you for your honesty. Did you run the marathon?
I was going to say, there's a
Can
marathon.
Congratulations. Can you explain it? This guy ran the marathon. He can't explain
That's
it.
right.
Congratulations.
He's too tired. That's
He's
why.
too tired. That's right. That's
it.
right.
Okay, but in all seriousness, because I don't want to just humiliate you, I actually did learn a little. I would say I was 0 on a 0 to 10, and after watching that segment with you, I'm like at a 2 or 3. I mean, I'm getting there
I feel
little
the
by
same
little.
way. I feel the same.
Well, I always say the same thing about watching Jared's show, that you see all these wonderful art exhibits and interviews
totally agree.
that you wouldn't
Totally agree.
necessarily go to all the time. But even your show is not the same as actually going
That's true.
and seeing the exhibit. And that's my problem with this. But again, I'm probably old and out of it, so we'll move on from that. So you and the mayor went on a tour of public art here in Boston, Mayor Wu, I should say, Michelle Wu. So give us the details.
Yeah, and I should say there's a whole group. Again, this goes to the mayor's desire to make the arts fundamental to the city's pandemic recovery, and talking about making sure there's funding, making sure that there is more public art in the city because of the engagement that she sees people have. But there's a great exhibition happening right now, and it's called Global Positioning. And it comes from the Public Art Fund in New York, where they've partnered with J.C. Deco, which has taken over a lot of the bus shelters in and around the city. And where you might normally find advertising, you'll find art.
I love this.
Isn't this
totally
fantastic?
Love this. Go ahead.
So the Public Art Fund, who's now led by Nicholas Baum, who was at the ICA, that's where I first got to know him years ago, they have commissioned artists from all over the world, and not super well-known artists, just artists who submitted and who were then commissioned to produce works. And so you can go and just be, like the other day I was running down the street and I came across one that I hadn't even seen. It made me pay attention in a different way, and then you kind of stop and take it in. You don't, not that museums are bad, not that galleries are bad, but you can just be out and about. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to have any preconceived notions about how you're looking. You're just taking in art dotted all throughout the city. And this is something the Public Art Fund is also doing in New York and Chicago, as well as Boston. So you can see these dotting the city all through June 6th.
Speaking of open studio, I saw on your show a couple of weeks ago when you're having the mayor playing the piano, Mayor Wu, entering City Hall. I mean, that's spectacular. Tell us about the artwork that's down there.
Well, I think it sends a huge message. I don't know if it's changed since I was there about a month ago, but you walk into City Hall, and if you haven't been there, you basically look up to the ceiling, and it's about 3 stories, I think, and you walk in and you see an installation for the Humphrey Street Studios, who were contending with losing their artist space. A huge thing that's happening in this city right now with all of the development. Of course, where the artists go is where people want to follow, because the artists go to the cool places and they find the cool buildings and they make them even cooler, and then the developers come. But that means artists lose their space. They have to leave the city, and we lose that energy. So these studios put together this exhibition talking about the value of space and the value of art, but it just fills City Hall as soon as you walk in. And then if you walk into the main entrance just to the left, you'll find a whole row of Haitian art, walls of Haitian art. So it really does feel like it's everywhere.
Was that Wu or was it somebody else?
This is all under the Wu administration.
Yeah, it's pretty
and,
neat.
It's public art. We've discussed this with you. It totally changes everything. I mean, it changes the feel of the city. Is just one. I assume she's really committed to spreading this all over the place, right? I mean, public art of some fashion.
That's what she's talked about. Yes.
What these? I'm just looking at photographs in a Globe story of this these 60 bus stop things. There are 20 different images. Am I right?
Yeah,
And
so
there are
each has three of theirs around the city. Yeah.
Is there a website that has the locations of all these things, do you know, where you can check them out as opposed to driving around hoping you'll bump into one?
I think if you go to publicartfund.org, that should take you here.
They are real. In all seriousness, I don't mean to be my usual hyperbolic self. They are fabulous. I mean, they really. And why are they disappearing in June? Is there?
Well, I think it's just the rotation, the general art rotation. I mean,
great.
and this is what's changed too. I think we used to have this conceived notion of public art are statues that we just have to move around the city. And now there's this acknowledgement that maybe things should just have a finite amount of time. They live here for a little while. They go away. Something else comes in. Something else activates the space. Something else is responding to our times because the times are changing faster than ever. Of course, we always say that if we're part of present history, nothing ever feels as, everything else seems slower than it is right now. So you want to have artists telling us about ourselves in this moment.
Is there more? I want to stay on this just one more second. A couple of years ago, I think, and I'm guessing it's pre-pandemic, but I don't know. There was a projection show, speaking of public art, and the reason I thought of it is I just saw David Leonard, the president of the library, walk by, and it was of immigrants, and he's an immigrant from Ireland. Where was that projected? Was that at City Hall? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I do remember. That was over a few different spaces. They did the Boston Common. They did the old State House.
Oh, that's right.
Where they were taking very historic spaces and projecting immigrant faces on them.
If you're listening and live in Cambridge, I don't know if this is happening in Brookline. There's been an explosion of public art. Not so much the bus stop thing and whatever or these projections, but there's so many walls of buildings.
Yeah.
There used to be these dull, gray things that are now
Brookline.
alive with this beautiful work.
Yeah,
but
they've done that around Boston too.
Oh,
so many huge places, and in your hometown of Philadelphia.
I know that.
I remember
it's
the first
big,
time I went there, like 15 years
know.
ago, and it's Renaissance. Unbelievable in Philadelphia. But I wanted to ask you something, Alice. I didn't know this was controversial. You talk about this new ICA show, A Place for Me, Figurative Painting Now. I didn't know that figurative painting has been controversial.
Well, I don't know that it was controversial. I think that people just got tired of it, and it was passé and it was old. So to remind people, figurative painting is depicting real life, so still life and portraits.
I love still life. I love them.
Well, sometimes
I feel like a good fruit bowl.
Yeah. So, as do I. I mean, Cezanne did them really well, and they still feel innovative. But the art world moved on, and it's breaking through barriers and doing different things, and so it kind of became passé. But there's a moment now, and I think we talked about this on the air, the big Alice Neal show that was in New York last year reminded people of the value in figurative painting and just looking at portraits and having these subjects look back at you and having this exchange. So at the ICA right now, where they have recognized that it is having a new moment, especially among younger artists, you see a show called A Place for Me, Figurative Painting Now, where there are 8 artists, and they're depicting their communities and their stories and their families. Some of it harkens back to these massive history paintings. Some of them are incredibly intimate. That's a word that Ruth Erickson, the curator of the show, used quite a bit as I walked through this show with her, that you find this great deal of intimacy here. And I just found it to be a really, really lovely show because you were being lit in on these stories and people and scenarios, and it just kind of felt like communing.
When you talk about still life, it's fruit bowls, it's flowers. What else is still life?
Bedrooms, tables. It can be anything that you're just depicting from real life.
If Cezanne had done an NFT, he'd be getting 10% of every pair. The pair gets resold and it gets a check.
It makes me feel as I should have new appreciation for my pears and my tables. That you can that is your life around you, right? We don't look at it.
I love that you say that because this is the power of art, to make you see something. That an artist makes you see something in a way that you hadn't thought of before. I always go home after going to a museum and kind of rearrange things a little bit or look at things a little bit differently.
I know.
And that's why I love this.
We're talking to Jared Bowen, who attempted and failed to explain NFTs to anybody
2 out
in our
of 3.
audience. Wait, was there anybody in the audience understood? Nobody. Nobody.
Where's my runner? He's more awake now.
No, he's only waving to you. Believe me, he's not raising his hand.
Doesn't he look terrific for a guy that just ran the marathon over there? I mean, what a handsome guy.
I know he's fit. I hate that.
He's very fit, very fit.
Fit is just so yesterday. So we only have time for one more thing, and we have Don't Eat the Mangoes in the Concord Museum, and I don't want to screw the one that may close before you're back next week. So you pick what you want to talk about, and we'll reserve the other one on next week.
Okay, we can talk about Concord next week, but let me just remind people, today is the 247th anniversary of the shot heard round the world out in Concord and Lexington. So next week we'll talk about how they've renovated the museum, and you can celebrate it. But this is a good week to go because the history is most present, I think.
Great.
But we were talking about Don't Eat the Mangoes, which is this really exciting show that I just saw at Chelsea. This is presented by Apollinaire Theatre and their new arm, Teatro Chelsea, which is an effort to really give exposure to Latin artists and playwrights. So I saw this show on Saturday night that all of a sudden it just clicked and turned, and I just felt all of the audience lurching forward in togetherness. So it's the story of this family, 3 daughters. They're living in Puerto Rico, and they're taking care of their ailing parents. Their mother has cancer. Their father has recently had a stroke. They kind of have problems with one another. One sister wants to move with her husband off the island. That's troubling to the other sisters. Another is working in banking, and so the other sisters are upset that she's foreclosing on homes. And the third sister wants to sell her home or a home to an American developer. So you have all of these issues that play within the family, aside from the major issues of having to take care of their parents. And then it takes this really, really dark turn, which I certainly did not see coming. And it was just one of those nights in the theater where I thought, this is so innovative, it's inventive, everything is tight here in terms of the performance, the writing, the cast coming together, the directing, and as I say, you just felt the audience lean in together. I don't want to say more than this because really dark and demented, which is one of my favorite words.
Really?
I love
demented
things so says what it
happen.
is, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So what's the name of the theater in Chelsea again?
So it's the Apollinaire Theatre along with Teatro Chelsea. That is presenting this right in Chelsea Square.
How long is Don't Eat the Mangoes there?
Through May 15th.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
You know, I just like to say, don't eat the mangoes. I'm a lousy cook, but I perfected certain things, like when to open a pineapple and when to open mangoes.
Great,
it's very important.
You might not want to eat mangoes after seeing the
Oh,
show.
you're kidding.
Well, I mean, don't do this.
Before I have mangoes every day. I love mangoes. Really?
Your mangoes will be fine.
Okay, all right.
Excuse me.
Thank you.
The pineapple trick is you pull a thing out.
No, that's not it.
What is it?
It's you to feel it. You to feel the pineapple.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, you really have
How
to
about
feel
the
it.
mango? How do you know when a mango
Well, the
is?
mango, it's the feel too, but it's tricky because you say when it's soft, but it has to be just the right degree of softness.
Do you remember when
and not
Martha
too
Stewart
soft.
would talk about massaging her melons?
She
do you
did.
remember
She
that?
massaged her
No,
melons
she
very
did.
well in the backyard of Turkey Hill.
Exactly. So what do you have a show Friday night or what?
That was before she went to jail.
That is correct.
Which was the best thing for her, by the way.
I know.
By the way, the
emerged
inmates,
victorious.
in all seriousness, she really did some great training
She
and
was the
stuff.
most stand-up person I can recall going to jail.
Remember when she came out with that Afghan draped around her?
Yeah.
I came out better than I went in.
And she taught all these women all these skills while she was in there.
Well, you know, I worked in that women's prison in upstate New York, Bedford Hills, when I was a young lawyer.
We know who
and
was
the woman
there.
who killed the diet
doctor.
doc
Yeah.
was there.
She plugged him.
What? She plugged him,
Yeah,
right.
she used to be running this very fancy women's prep school.
Right, and she became a teacher for all her fellow incarcerated women, in all seriousness.
Wasn't he the guy that had that torturous diet? Was he Dr.?
I think so.
Yeah.
Dr. Torture. That was the name of
I
it.
don't know.
What are you doing Friday night
She
there?
shouldn't have eaten the mangoes either, I understand.
So,
what are you doing again?
Speaking of prison, we'll take you to Prison Nation, which is a new photography exhibition at the Davis Museum at Wellesley College, really looking at the issue of mass incarceration, but taking people into prisons. And we'll also sit down with the Greenwich sisters. Kirsten Greenwich has written the new play Our Daughters Like Pillars, which is premiering at the Huntington Theater Company.
Oh, fantastic.
It's a family comedy, and I had the fortune of I had met Kirsten, then I met her sister Carrie, who's an historian, and the third sister, Caitlin, is an author, a novelist, so we brought them all together
that's
to have
great.
this
I love
conversation.
that.
They're
That's
fabulous
great.
people.
Jared, thank you very
Friday
much.
night. Nice to see you, Jared Bowen.
Good to see you.
And I think you explained the NFTs.
Now let's hear it for the
extremely well.
explanation of NFTs.
It's very,
Is that fabulous?
We got it. We got it.
He nailed it.
Jared Bowen, Executive Arts Editor here at GBH, and thank you again, Jared, for being here. You can see his show every Friday night, 8:30, right here on GBH Channel 2.
And by the way, you can check it in all seriousness, the segment on NFTs, which is pretty instructive.
Yeah, it's online.
Just online. Just
Go
check
to
it
Open
out.
Studio, GBH, you can see the whole thing
You can
right
indeed.
there. Yes, you can. Anyway, coming up, we're going to talk to CNN's John King about the latest out of DC, Ukraine, etc. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live, as we do every Tuesday and Friday, from Boston Public Library.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams has pursued a strategy of aggressively clearing encampments of the homeless. Now faith leaders and advocates are condemning these policies as inhumane. We're discussing the national crisis of homelessness and how New York's policies compare with the strategies being taken in other cities. That's next time on The Takeaway from WNYC and PRX.
This afternoon at 2, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you and Johnson & Wales University, dedicated to providing an education powered by purpose, preparing graduates for careers in fields such as healthcare, business, and STEM. You can explore more at jwu.edu. And The Huntington, presenting Our Daughters Like Pillars. Kirsten Greenidge's new play about the joys and tensions of sisterhood is now playing at the Huntington Calderwood/BCA, huntingtontheater.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim, Brody, and Margery live from the BPL, streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. Delayed but not daunted. Joining us now on Zoom was our fault, by the way, because of the fire alarm.
Fire drill.
From deep within CNN's boiler room somewhere, CNN national political correspondent John King. John also hosts Inside Politics, which you can catch weekdays at noon. Thanks for your flexibility, John. It's good to see you.
It is my pleasure. You're seeing my empty office because they just shifted our office, so I'm in an empty, kind of messy office, but it'll be beautiful by next Tuesday.
I'm sure it will.
And I'm just back from a spectacular weekend at home in Boston, so I'm in a great mood. Here we go. We'll start off in a great mood. We'll see where we end.
Did you come for the
opening day?
You didn't go to the Nets Celtics game, did you? Or did you?
I did not. I went to the Red Sox game with 27 members of my family.
Oh my gosh!
On Saturday, and then my daughter ran the marathon yesterday.
Congratulations!
Wow!
That is
awesome.
great. Oh, that is great, John.
Yeah,
Congratulations
so awesome.
to her too. That's
so
great.
Is she feeling okay today, or is the thighs a little difficult, or what?
She was a little stiff after, but she was great. I have three amazing children. They're all different ways, but Hannah King has the tenacity of a warrior, and she was great. It was really great.
Congratulations to Hannah
King. That's a great name too. I love the name Hannah. So John King, let's talk with the Democrats' problems. Elizabeth Warren had a piece in the New York Times, Democrats can avoid disaster in November. She gives her prescription. But I think this is the crucial, as they say, line here. To put it bluntly, Warren wrote, if we fail to use the months remaining before the elections to deliver on more of our agenda, Democrats are headed toward big losses in the midterms. She's saying what many other people are saying. You think she's right?
Yes. Yes. Look, this is a very bad climate for the Democrats. Any president's first midterm, historically, with the exception of George W. Bush right after 9/11, it's a tough one. For both Obama and Trump, the first midterms were horrific. They both lost control of the House. You have a strong economy if you look at the fundamentals, but then you have inflation, gas prices, which are going down a little bit. Gas is cheaper now than it was a month ago. It's down quite significantly, actually, from the peak. But still, people are getting kicked in the teeth. And I noticed this being home, just talking to my siblings, talking to other people in Boston. It's hard to feel good about the economy when you're paying more for so many things.
Yep.
And now the president spent a lot of time on Ukraine. So he's right up the road from you in Portsmouth, New Hampshire today. Yeah. Can the president go on the road, explain what he has done in the rearview mirror, and then to Senator Warren's point, can the Democrats get a few things done looking out the windshield in the months ahead? And can they get them done quickly enough so that come September, October, November, when people vote, they actually feel some results? They feel like somebody's listening to me, somebody's trying to help in a tangible way, not talk, something that actually helps.
We've heard a lot of talk from Elizabeth Warren. She's a big proponent of forgiving student loans up to $50,000 in student loans. But I've heard other Democratic analysts say even forgiving up to $10,000 would be a big mistake for Biden because more than half of America never went to college. The resentment could be huge. That would hurt inflation and be seen in many cases as a big giveaway program. Is that right?
Well, that's the debate, Margery, and you got right there in describing this. that the challenges for the Democrats in terms of, do we want to try to broaden the party? Do we want to try to reach new voters, people who might have voted for Trump, people who maybe 10 years ago were Democrats or 20 years ago Democrats who've been disaffected? Those are your blue-collar, high school educated, maybe people who work with their hands. Or do we want to play to what has been the strength for the Democrats in the last 10, 15 years, which is college educated people in urban areas and in the suburbs who might be thankful for more relief? But you're right, it could possibly annoy, aggravate, drive away some other people. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, but let me just say, Margery, in response to your question, he was elected on that promise. And the arguments were made against him at the time. He made a commitment. And I think the issue for a lot of people, even those who aren't crazy about it. I don't know if he was
elected on that promise.
I think it was I think if you stop.
I think he was elected because he wasn't Donald Trump.
Well, of course. I mean, there are a multiplicity of factors. Right. But I think a lot of people knew. I mean, Warren was standing 5 feet away from us 3 weeks ago, right here, and saying there would be no proposal. This is her position, that is on the table anywhere that would reduce the wealth gap more dramatically than student loans. And on that note, John, in Elizabeth Warren's piece in the New York Times, she argues that not only could Biden unilaterally do the student loan thing, she also writes that he could lower prescription drug prices and expand overtime pay for individuals. Is there a consensus that he has power to do all? Well, forget the student loan thing, because I know he's got a little doubt. How about the prescription drugs and the overtime issue?
There are debates about these things, and we've been through these issues now again. One of the byproducts of our polarized politics, whether we're talking about the Obama presidency, the Trump presidency, and now the Biden presidency, is if Congress isn't going to pass your plan, what can you do with the pen? And some of these things withhold the challenge. Some of them get thrown out in the court. So I think that is one of the questions on the table. Joe Biden, by DNA, Jim, is more of a traditionalist. He served in the Senate for 37 years. He believes you should pass a law. But I do think as we get deeper into the midterm year, there are going to be more of these proposals on his desk, whether it's prescription drugs, whether it's do more on college. To the college student loan part, Biden just doesn't want to be as generous as Elizabeth Warren. He wants to do something to relieve that debt or erase that debt, but he doesn't want to be as generous. Mm-hmm. And again, he would prefer, he's done this through executive actions delaying things so far, he would prefer something get passed. I think the big question is, so here we go. We're about to end April and move into May, right? 10 more days left of April. So can the Democrats in April, what's left in April and the rest of May, can they actually come together on anything? And then after that point, I think you have to think, okay, forget about it. Then we're moving, June, July, election year, they're gone. They're campaigning. Then the pressure will build on the president to use the pen. His hope is to get at least some modest things done. Can he? Mark me down as skeptical, and I'm interested in the feedback from New Hampshire today, where Senator Hassan is with him on so many things, but she's against him on this Title 42, reversing the Trump immigration policy. Yeah. So watching the Democrats, can they stay? I get, not my job to agree or disagree with the policies. I get what Senator Warren is saying. Let's do some tangible things. Let's prove to people we understand they're struggling and they need some help. I get it completely. Can the Democrats deliver on that? Do enough Democrats agree with her? That's what the next 6-8 weeks are going to be about, testing that.
We're talking to John King from CNN.
So John,
and Dorchester, obviously.
President Biden's poll numbers are terrible, and I wonder what this is about. One of my theories, and it's a very superficial thing, but I think there's some truth to it. I remember when George W. Bush was the president, he would come out and give a speech, and the whole time I'm looking at him, he had this deer in the headlights look about him, and he made me nervous, and I thought, geez, I hope he gets through this, I hope he gets through this, I hope he gets through this, because he made me nervous. I have the same feeling about Joe Biden, who does not look robust, let's put it that way. He's a very thin man, he's older, he doesn't look well walking, it's very superficial, he struggles in his speeches, but I can't help thinking that is part of it. I was no fan of President Trump, but President Trump did not make me nervous in the sense he was going to not make it through a press conference or not make it through, even though he said some crazy things, or a speech. There's something, I don't know. You get where I'm going here.
Yeah. I think that is a view shared by others. You're not alone in that view. How big is that group? I'd have to pour through the data. But I think, look, the president, again, a first midterm climate is always hard. We live in a very evenly divided time. He won an election where the other guy is still fighting. 17 months later, Donald Trump and his allies are still fighting to overturn the 2020 election. So in an evenly divided country where everything is contested, where if Joe Biden says Tuesday comes after Monday, the Republicans will say, no, it doesn't. And so then you're trying to build a coalition in the midterm elections, whatever slice it is Margery that worries about him. Is he up to the job? Is he physically up to the job? Is he energetically up to the job? That's one slice. Then you have everybody who in different ways is exhausted by COVID, right? And so whether it's the mask mandate, or whether it's can I go back to work, or whether it's what's up with my kids in school, there's a whole combination of things that I think have combined, a whole bunch of little breezes that have combined to be a giant wind in his face. And it's an incredibly difficult climate for him and for the Democrats. The question is, can he change it at least a little bit? And then later in the year, we'll be talking about, can he change it in the right places, right? Focusing on this Senate race or that Senate race. Because most people would tell you today they think the House is gone. The question is, A, can the president prove the analysts and prove history wrong on that count? But then B, places like New Hampshire and that Senate race, there are a half dozen of those we're going to watch very closely to the end. But there are a lot of factors, but I do think that's a piece of it, what you mentioned.
John King, I've asked you the same question based upon different factual situations many a time, so apologies in advance. When I read the stories about Senator Lee from Utah and Congressman Roy, I think from Texas, about the text that they sent the White House to Mark Meadows, the chief of staff. This came out of the documents that were provided by Meadows to the January 6th committee before he stopped cooperating, basically saying we need the evidence of fraud, we need it by this weekend, we need it quickly, or we can't keep the Senate, Trump supporters afloat. If John McCain had done this, or his supporters had done this right after he lost to Obama, or if John Kerry's supporters had done it right after he lost to W. Bush, it would seem to me this would be the biggest story in America every single day. Two sitting members of the House and Senate urging the chief of staff of the president for information so they could make the case that the election was fraudulent. Are you frustrated? I know you don't take sides. That's not my question. By what a short shelf life, what I consider to be these attacks on democracy have in this age?
Well, I think, Jim, as someone who's done this for 35 plus years now, I think we should continue to cover this story. I do think, to your point about why isn't it getting even more attention, I do think the big lie proponents who, again, continue to this day, this is not just a study of what happened in the rearview mirror. They are still today. They say they're trying to reinstate Donald Trump. Okay, fine, whatever. That's ludicrous. But what they are trying to do as they push that effort is to get Republicans around the country to be leaning forward. So you don't wait till the count. You don't wait to the legal suit. If things aren't going the way you want, try to change the count. Try to get involved. Try to take the count away from a Secretary of State you don't like and bring it to a legislature. That's what they're trying to do. They are trying to essentially be ready next time to do what they couldn't do last time. So this continues. And so that deserves our attention every single day. Again, we're still coming out of a pandemic perhaps, but we're still in a pandemic. We have a very challenging economy right now that is roaring in some ways, wind in your face in another. Now we have a defining global moment for all of the democracies in Ukraine, a world-defining, generational defining global event happening. So it's not going to get as much daily attention. Does that mean you should forget about it? Absolutely not. Does it mean as we get closer to the midterm election, all of these things will be back in front of us more? Yes. Just quickly, one more point about Senator Lee and Congressman Roy. The interesting thing, if you read the full text exchange that we have made public now, and I compliment our Capitol Hill team. They were
I
the first
forgot,
ones to have
it's
this
CNN,
story.
of course,
Yeah.
they broke the story, yeah.
Great colleagues working this story, is that early on they were saying, give us information, we want to help, give us information. You do see, I'm not defending them, but you do see if you read the chronology at the end, after watching this play out for months, Mike Lee says Sidney Powell's really smart, the president should listen to her. A month later, he's like, Sidney Powell's nuts. You need to run from this. By the end, they were like, look, you guys don't have the evidence. We cannot do this. We don't have the constitutional power. The law doesn't support you. The vice president can't do this. The Congress can't do this. Stop. You're hurting the president. So the evolution of it is important too, that even people who were giving them the green light early on, please help us, suddenly did, again, you decide at home, voters, whether you want, whether it's enough or not, suddenly saw yellow lights and then in the end saw red lights and said, whoa, this has gone too far.
But the question there, John, is when they said it went too far, was that because they had an epiphany about democracy, or they had an epiphany that this effort that was fraudulent was hurting them personally because there was no there there? Do you know what I mean?
If you read the text, they talk about how it would end the republic or it would end the Constitution. Look, imagine if we abolished the Electoral College. Well, Al Gore beat George W. Bush in the popular vote. Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump in the popular vote. So I think near the end, a lot of them said, wait a minute, the way it works now actually benefits us. If you look ahead to 2024, there are a lot of Democrats worried about Donald Trump coming back, getting blown out in the popular vote, but winning the presidency again.
Well, speaking of
and Republicans.
Speaking of Donald Trump coming back and winning the presidency again, there's been a lot of stories lately about that would be the former president, making choices that didn't seem to make sense in terms of who was leading. The example the Washington Post gives a couple of days ago is he met down in Mar-a-Lago with this David McCormick fellow from Pennsylvania, former hedge fund CEO. He's running for the Senate and is doing well. He was leading in the polls, but the president, Trump, went around and endorsed his rival, Mehmet Oz, the TV doctor who has been in a lot of trouble for quackery on television and who's not doing so well.
Because he had good ratings on his television show.
Yeah, because he said the president thought he was great on his TV show, and he was really popular on his TV show. But they gave another couple of examples, North Carolina, Georgia, David Perdue, et cetera. So if he does endorse the wrong people that end up losing, does that matter in terms of his glittery star as a kingmaker?
It's a great question because it is one of the big subplots of this midterm election year. Do we learn? And we will in the primaries that start pretty soon, right? So we're going to have the next couple months of rolling primaries in different states. Is Donald Trump's grip on the Republican Party, is it waning? Is it growing? Is it about the same? Is it different in different parts of the country? I think that's a very fair question, and we want to watch that. I would say this, and Laura Barone Lopez of Politico was on my show today. She made this important point, that many of the non-Trump candidates running as Republicans are still saying they think there's a lot of fraud in elections, are still backing some of the anti-democratic things that Donald Trump pushes. So we focus a lot on his personal endorsements, as we should, to see if, is there something, is he losing the Midas touch, if you will. That's important. But the overall trajectory of the Republican Party in terms of anti-democratic steps, pro-Trumpy steps, whatever you want to call them, I'm at a loss for words sometimes to try to put them into my language because it's so out of bounds, if you will. That actually, so the Republican Party is moving in Trump's direction. When Chris Sununu, for example, the governor of New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan's grateful probably. He did not run against her. Yeah. Why? He doesn't want any part of this town, which is broken, and that party. Larry Hogan would not run for Senate in Maryland, the Republican governor of Maryland. Why? He doesn't want any part of this town, which is broken, and he doesn't want any part of that party. And so you have a lot of Republicans kind of going to the sidelines. But the ones who are running, more often than not, if they're not Velcro to Trump, they're still roughly aligned with him.
So, John, we only have 30 seconds. When you go to a Red Sox game with 26 of your relatives,
that's
do you
great.
say to the guy or woman, "I'll have 27 beers"? How does that work exactly?
We supported the farmers very well this Saturday. I will tell you that. The wheat hops and barley growers are not steps this week. If there's one sector of the economy that's better today than it was Saturday, that's what it is.
How far in
You're a good
advance?
American,
How far in
John
advance
King.
you have to get those tickets so everybody can sit together? Like months in advance?
It was about a month. The staff of the Red Sox was fantastic. Because my daughter was running the marathon and because it was relatively reasonable, we got a nice little suite so everybody could talk together.
Oh, great.
We've sat in the stands together before, and you get to say hello, but then you're all sitting in your seats and it's hard to have a conversation. So
That's
we
great.
did the suite. I did it for my daughter because she's a hero for this past weekend. All my kids are heroes, but right now she is front and center. I did it for her mostly, but it was great because of COVID. I haven't seen my siblings all that much in the last couple of years. So,
Congratulations to Hannah from us, John.
Yeah,
That's
John,
great.
thank you so much. Great to talk to you as always,
Be
John.
well,
See you
John
soon.
King.
Thank you. No more fire alarms.
No more fire alarms. No, we are done for today.
you,
There's
John.
only a few
Thanks.
seconds left. If there's going to be one, I think we're okay. Thank you very much for listening to
Thanks,
Boston
John.
Public Radio. Thank you to people that came down to the library. We really appreciate that. To people that are watching us on something or other, they're watching us on something.
Yeah, YouTube.
YouTube,
I've
thank
only
you
said
very
that
much.
42
okay,
times.
on YouTube, thank you very much for tuning in for that as well. If you haven't gotten enough, you probably have enough by now, but if you don't, you can watch us or listen to us 24/7 away of our podcast. Tomorrow, we're going to have Nathaniel Stinnett from the Environmental Voter Project here, which aims to turn non-voting environmentalists into consistent voters. I can't wait to talk to him. I want to thank as well our crew. So I think, is Simon Montgomery going to be here tomorrow? I think
Simon
she's gonna be
Montgomery's here.
Yeah, Simon Montgomery for
Art
Afternoon News.
Kaplan, Ali Noorani.
Thank you. We have a big packed show tomorrow.
We do.
Okay. As we always do, Jim.
We do.
Or most of the time, anyway. I want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Mackenzie Farkas, Rebecca Tauber. Our engineer is John LeClaw Parker. Our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. We want to thank the special team that came to the BPL today because they had a lot of work to do here this morning. Rob Fagnan and Steve Baracci. I'm Margery Egan. Oh, what's on TV, Jim?
Thank you for asking. Chris Doty is one of the 2 Republicans running for governor. Chris joins me tonight. Jim McGovern, the House Chair of the Rules Committee, who cares more about hunger in America than any person on the planet and is fighting to keep the Northampton VA open. Congressman McGovern joins me as well. It's all tonight at 7 o'clock.
I'm Margery Egan.
I'm Jim Browdy.
Thanks again for tuning in.
Thanks
Hope
for coming, everybody.
Tomorrow.
We appreciate
Thank you for
it.
down to the library. Hope you have a great day.